Okay, I call the regular meeting of the Eugene School Board to order. It's Wednesday, February 23rd, 2022 at 7:03 p.m. We have, I believe, all board members present or on their way. So I got to get everyone on my screen. We have Alicia, we're all here virtually on Zoom. We have Alicia Hayes, Judy Newman, Maya Rabasa, Martina Shabram, Laurel O'Rourke, Gordon Lafer, and I don't see Mary yet. Mary Walston should be joining, but she isn't here. We'll let you know when she does join us. Let's begin by, please join me with the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God, indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all. I will now read the land acknowledgement. The Eugene School Board would like to acknowledge that our institution sits on the homelands of the Kalapuya people. In the treaties of 1851 and 1854 through 1855, and the subsequent forced removals of many Indian people from Western Oregon, some of the Kalapuya were moved to the Grand Ronde Reservation and some were moved to the Siletz Reservation. It's important to note that all of Lane County was an important trading and gathering area for camas and other resources. During the Restoration era from 1977 to 1989, Lane County was designated as the service area for the Confederated Tribes of Coos, Lower Umpqua, and Siuslaw Indians, and the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde Indians, the Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians, and the Coquille Indian Tribe, and the Cow Creek Band of Umpqua Indians. Eugene School District 4J acknowledges that the descendants of original and service area inhabitants of this land are still here today. They are thriving members of our schools and our communities. Countless members of other tribes now also call our community and schools our home, their home. We wish to thank those original stewards of this land. We as fellow stewards of this land wish to remember that we need to take good care of this land and take good care of all the members of our school district community. Thank you. Okay, we are now on to the agenda review. Are there any changes to the agenda? Or do we have a motion? There are no changes. Well, I guess if there aren't any, it's all right and the agenda stands as it is. So we don't need a motion, we just all agree. Great. Okay, then I'm going to turn over the time. I'd like to introduce Superintendent Vanderkar and give her some time to make comments.
So my comments today, I'm going to share a letter that I received from a student, and then afterwards show a video of what our equity team has been up to and the good work that they've been working with the community. So I'm going to begin reading a letter that I did not write and one that was sent to me that they gave me permission to share. Dear students and staff who think using the N-word in class is the appropriate thing to do when studying the play Fences or discussing race in the classroom in general, you may think that it's okay for a multitude of reasons. Here are a few of the validations I've heard. It's for educational purposes in an educational setting. Not saying it out loud is inauthentic to the purpose of the author. White people created the word, they should be able to use it. On the surface, these seem like completely reasonable opinions. Usually though, these types of statements come from white people themselves, and when stated, there's usually a layer of unrecognizable privilege blanketed across them, hiding the true consequences behind the use of the N-word. Specifically regarding the play Fences, here's why I, A student of color truly appreciates the absence of the N-word during class. Let me remind you how the study of this play is already completely inauthentic. In class, we are simply reading this play, not performing it. That is the first flaw. The second flaw is that I go to a white school and all of my classes, including my literature class, are predominantly white. August Wilson did not intend for a class of white students in a white school to be reading or performing this play. Therefore, we are already breaking two of the most fundamental intentions of this piece of work. Not saying the N-word will not make this process any more inauthentic. If anything, it makes it more authentic, which brings me to my next point. August Wilson wanted to shed light on the true African-American experience through his plays. The play Fences represents the decades of the 1950s, when a shift in the use of the N-word began. Black people started to claim the word for themselves and use it as a term of brotherhood and camaraderie. People of color are often held to a higher standard than the general population. We have to work harder, think smarter, act whiter, and watch while people are handed the opportunities and born into the privileges we fight for each and every day. Withdrawing the right for white students to say this word allows for a tiny glimpse into what Black people go through every day. Having things taken away from them, rights revoked, disadvantages, inconveniences, and unfairness. We deal with that and so much more just because of the color of our skin we were born into. Please realize that debating about not being able to say a word in class is a privilege in itself. This brings me to my final point. I'm writing this letter anonymously because I don't have the privilege of debating this topic in class while feeling safe at the same time. I'm here trying to get an education too. I deserve to feel welcome and safe in the classrooms I am in. And while some may say the educational aspect is why we should be able to say the N-word in class, that is the exact same reason why I say we absolutely should not. The thought of being in class and having to hear this word repeated by my white peers is not one I enjoy. It inhibits my ability to educationally benefit from the learning experience, especially when I already have to hear it daily in the halls, the cafeteria, the library, or anywhere else I go. It is a huge relief knowing that I won't have to hear it in class when I'm trying to learn just like everyone else. Sincerely, an anonymous student of color. As I said in the beginning, we have a video. We've received an absolute wonderful, generous donation, and we'll be able to start No Place for Hate next year. And this is just a brief start to the community work that we're doing. There's no place for hate in 4J or Eugene, and I really believe that we're on our way. And we're putting together community groups, we're putting together groups within our schools, we're funding positions so that there is someone responsible when something happens.
No place for hate, a strong stance for the 4J school district.
The goal is to work our way to prevention. The problem is right now we have what we have. We've inherited years and years of what I would say, consistent neglect. That's gotten us to where we are.
That's why new this year, the district hired 2 directors of equity with plans to move ahead with prevention programs while creating policies for hate, bias, and racial issues.
I mean, that's the work of this year, is identifying a program, reaching out to different agencies and organizations to identify one that works for us. So that's part of the work. We have hired student affinity coordinators that work with students, families, and school staff, and they're in schools every day.
When an incident of hate or bias is reported, an administrator is notified. The incident is then moved to a level director.
That director is responsible for connecting with Misael or I to make sure whether we believe that it reaches a level that we should call together a team of people to look at it.
Currently, there is a bias and response advisory team that consists of more than 20 people. We sat down with the detective who is part of EPD's Special Investigations Unit. He asked to remain anonymous because he is assigned to work with marginalized groups in our community who experience this hate and bias. They often work on investigations that require them to be undercover.
We follow up on crimes that have been occurring here on our local school campuses. Some of those include threats of violence, allegations of kids bringing weapons to school, making threats to harm teachers, staff, and other students.
And he says a large portion of threats and comments are coming from social media. But parents and students should know the police and district officials are watching.
The idea of an electronic fingerprint is very real. They think that they're just anonymous. Anytime you're using a device, there's identifiers within that device. There's tools that law enforcement have to be able to gather that information.
My goal is that we get to a point in our prevention that students feel like they can report, they feel like they're expected to report, they take pride in also participating in the removal of hate and bias. Then I think you've gotten to where you want to be.
Miles Pendleton, the new NAACP president, is also working with the district to create a holistic and open dialogue.
Collaborating with the school district to understand what students need help in what areas. How do we reach those students? And after we've reached them in availed opportunities, how do we ensure that those opportunities are accessible, whether geographically or just in a degree of understanding that they exist? That's just but one of the many and countless examples that, I think we point to when we talk about proactive advocacy, which is really preventative advocacy. And preventative in the sense that we don't want it to get to a place where we have an unfortunate situation of bias or racial animus. And then in that sense, we're reacting and try to figure out how do we regroup and re-rally our community forward. We want to do that work before it gets to kind of a place of discomfort or a place of real hurt.
People are going to feel this, and we are going to support the kids who need us to support them, and hold people accountable who do things they shouldn't do. So thank you to the team. Thank you to the community for supporting us. We'll just keep pressing forward. And Larry did say it exactly right. We're behind and it's really hard to get caught up, but that is the goal of the team. And really it is good to be part of a team that works forward instead of staying right where we were. So thanks for the opportunity to share.
Thank you, Superintendent. That was exciting. And I just want to acknowledge, want to thank our generous donors who are helping us get No Place for Hate in the schools. It's a really wonderful peer supported program that it's great we're taking advantage of this opportunity. Well, I want to start my comments tonight by acknowledging that February is Black History Month, and I've always have mixed feelings about assigning 1 month a year to topics that should be part of our daily life and learning. But I will say that I have read articles, seen presentations, and learned things that I did not know before because people have taken the time to share them this month. One of the resources I received were links to several videos made by children over the years about Black History Month. I was really personally touched by these videos, and I think they're very effective teaching tools. And I didn't coordinate this with the superintendent, but I wanted to show a really brief clip tonight of a YouTube of one of those videos. So I think Carrie or Lisa were going to help show that. It's just about a minute.
She's coined a new term for the times we're living in.
Brace for it, parents of America.
Alternative facts. Alternative facts.
What are those? Oh, what? Alternative facts? Lies. Also known as stereotypes or false narratives. It's like saying Black history began with slavery. That's offensive. Or that we'll never see another Black president in our lifetime. What about me? This Black History Month, we're focusing on the facts, not alternative facts. Indisputable. Truth. Real. Black girl magic is real. Black boy joy is real. Black wealth is real. Black beauty is real. Black support is real. Black excellence is real. It's real. Black love, that's real. Black lives are real. I'm real. Black history didn't begin with slavery, and it doesn't end with the Obamas, whom we love and miss. No, like, really, we really miss you. Facts.
Thank you. So I hope you were touched with that video the way I was. But so I just want to also briefly comment on a couple important things that have recently happened. First, I want to say how sincerely grateful I am that we've reached a tentative agreement on our contract with licensed staff, and want to thank the negotiating teams for their persistence and commitment to work out this agreement. We know how hard every single staff member is working every single day to teach and support students. There are not enough resources to adequately express the worth of every 4J staff member. Making this district run each and every day, from teachers to instructional assistants, to bus drivers, to transportation staff, to nutrition workers, to custodians, to secretaries, to principals, to administrators, to grounds crew, to construction and maintenance workers. We couldn't do it without you, and I extend to you my most sincere and heartfelt appreciation and thanks. I also want to share with my board members and our listening audience that I've been thinking about our board and our upcoming training and retreat with the Alma Advisory Group consultant. I know that one of our strengths is the different experiences, viewpoints, and expertise each of the 7 of us bring to our shared work. I've highlighted this before in my comments, and lately I've been reflecting on how to really leverage this strength in our work. I believe that one way we can do this is by figuring out how to have healthy disagreements and discourse in ways that really expand our ways of doing things and support positive outcomes for students. When constructive discussion and disagreements are absent, a team will not perform well, because not being able to have healthy disagreements is a hallmark of high functioning and successful teams. In my research on how to have healthy disagreements, I've learned about several critical practices that make this type of discourse possible. We know that many of these practices, what they are, we already know them, and they're really simple to list. You're going to go, when I say them, I know these, but they're really difficult to apply. Some examples are to listen to others carefully and validate that you have heard and understood them. To understand the needs, hopes, and fears of others and what they want to accomplish. To speak about common or shared interests, and to not take disagreements personally. We all have much to learn and practice, and I truly do hope we can get there individually and together. Thank you. Now we get to get comments from our student board representatives. So I have a list, so maybe I'll go through the list and say, let's start with Taryn from North.
Hello. So I'm going to start with some recent events at North. So our dance team placed first place. I'm on the dance team. First place 2 weekends ago, and second place 1 weekend ago. Our wrestling team had 4 individuals qualify for state at their district competition, which is exciting. Our boys team got third. Our swim boys team got third in district, and our girls got 6th in district. And then cheer is also getting ready for their state competitions. And then National Honor Society sold chocolate for Valentine's Day, and GSA sold Valentine's. And then as well, our ASB decorated our glass lounge for Valentine's Day. And I also wanted to highlight that the superintendent came to our BSU to address the recent racial harassment policy. And she gave us a space for our students, specifically our students of color, to voice their opinions and their needs. And so we very greatly appreciate her doing this, and it makes our students feel heard and acknowledged. knowing that we have individuals that are in positions of power that are listening to us makes us feel heard and accepted, and thank you. And then I was wondering about the upcoming mask mandate, it being dropped on the 31st. I was wondering if there's going to be a space for our students to voice their opinions on that and how they feel and if they may feel unsafe and whatnot. And then I also wanted to follow up on more mental health resources for our students, specifically our students of color and our Jewish students, in response to the recent racial and anti-Semitic targeted attacks. I know that we haven't had a lot of mental health resources given or supports for that, but knowing that the racial harassment policy is in place is definitely giving us some comfort. And yeah, so that's what's been going on. And thank you.
Thanks, Taryn. We're going to be talking about the mask mandate in our next 2 meetings, and you'll get to be here, and we'll definitely want to hear from you. Thanks.
Thank you.
So we have Noah.
Hello, my name is Noah Abenzel, and I am student representative for South Eugene High School. I'd like to start just by mentioning some things that are happening at South right now. Currently, student government is planning our Spring Fest, which is our spring club fair meant to promote the different clubs and student unions at South. We also have been doing a lot of intramural sports at lunch. And so we just finished intramural volleyball, and now we're doing intramural dodgeball for the students. As well, we're planning different outreach opportunities with Roosevelt Middle School and Spencer's Butte Middle School in order to help make that transition from middle school to South more fluid and build their students' relationship with South before they've arrived at South. Also, South Eugene Theater is putting on a play called The Revolutionists, which will be occurring on March 10th, 11th, and 12th at 7 p.m. and then on the 13th at 2 p.m. in the South Eugene Little Theater. And tickets are $7 for students and seniors and $10 for adults. And then to mention some other things, recently there was a walkout from 4J schools, and it started at South Eugene High School. And students were protesting the lack of action relating to climate change. And I believe that since clearly this is a topic that is a huge priority for students and for the student community, that I think that this should also be a priority for administration, since it is something that a lot of students are passionate about, not only at South, but at all of the 4J schools. And I believe that since this is a priority for students and something that students are working to take action with, that I think that this should also be reflected within our administration's priorities. Another concern, similarly to what Taryn was mentioning, is that at South Eugene, there's definite concerns with mental health issues, especially during this time of year. Like the middle of winter is particularly tough for students. And that is pretty clear in the levels of engagement and motivation within classes. And I believe that at times like this, it's very important that we have resources that are readily available, but also incorporated into classes so that students who might not feel comfortable going out of their way to utilize resources are given those resources very directly. And that is everything that I have for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Noah. Let's see, I think that Violet is here.
Yes, I am. Okay, should I start? Sorry. So I'm Violet. I'm the IHS student representative, and I also go to Churchill because I have a couple announcements for Churchill that you asked me to share. But just starting off, I think it's next week or the week after that is Staff Appreciation Week. It's coming up, so our student government has been working on getting ready for that. And preparing for like what we're doing for our different like IHS staff members at all the campuses. And then some sports news, really exciting. Our Churchill girls swim team placed first in the 5A state championship. So that's really exciting. They broke a ton of records. And we also had a senior on the boys team set a new OSAA state record. So it's also pretty awesome. We've got some really good swimmers over at Churchill. And in terms of the theater, there were auditions happening for our school's production of The Wizard of Oz. So that's happening this week. Cast list goes out on Friday. And so that's really exciting. And then there's not much news surrounding IHS at the moment, honestly, because juniors and seniors are working on our IAs or internal assessments at the moment. So everybody's pretty busy with that as we're preparing for our exams in May. Yeah, this week we're also having, and Yo-Yo's going to touch on this a little more, but it's Black Excellence Week at Churchill in honor of Black History Month, which is being organized by our school's BSU and some amazing coordinators and affinity groups within that. So we have a display within the auditorium throughout the week, which is being observed by the entire school during our advisories that we're having for the entire week. And also we're having peer-led panels by mostly upperclassmen to just go into all the classes and have discussions with students, basically about the school climate and everything going on with that. We had a similar thing happen within IHS about a month ago when we came in and we had conversations with the underclassmen, which has been really effective in sort of repairing the school climate that was definitely damaged due to COVID. So yeah, our school's BSU and FSU, so our Black Student Union and Feminist Student Union, held a collaborative meeting with over 100 students last Friday to prepare and discuss the importance of Black Excellence Week and how we as a student population can continue to push for accountability within our school and for our students. So that was really exciting, and we're looking forward to having more joint meetings in the future. And our affinity group leaders are starting to have meetings with one another to sort of work on how we can work together to, again, improve the school climate and work to push for the issues that we're all really invested in. Within IHS, we're also working on trying to figure out the possibility of our, which is supposed to be yearly IHS celebration that we're supposed to have at the end of every year, which obviously has been halted by COVID. So we're basically testing out the possibilities of doing that now. It is an outdoor celebration, so we're just sort of seeing how that's going to go this year and working out the specifics of that. And then just some like small concerns that I heard from some students that I wanted to share with you all. Just some continued COVID safety concerns, basically surrounding school policies and the fact that a lot of students feel that they have to take it upon themselves to be enforcing some of these mask mandates and things themselves. So that doesn't always make people feel like safe or very comfortable in the school when they themselves are the ones who have to actively like tell other students and like their own peers that they should be wearing their masks. And then I had some students ask me questions about basically like discrepancies in terms of like what is allowed on like campus to campus basis, if that makes sense. For example, like things with like school dances or assemblies, like basically the levels, because I know it all goes through like principals and things like that. But there was questions about like the levels of what is allowed to be different at every campus in terms of rules specifically for that from other students, just like, for example, like the differences between like Churchill and Sheldon, like the different things they're allowed to do there. And then just the last thing, I just wanted to state and reflect upon what me and some other students have been seeing the past few weeks from some of the most hardworking and passionate educators and staff members at these high schools. And that is that they need support just like our students do. I know certain staff, especially our amazing, at Churchill, our amazing staff members of color who are taking on tremendous burdens during this time to support our marginalized students and really fight to make sure that students are able to have a safe space within our schools. And as a student and someone that continues to be greatly impacted by these individuals, I know me and many other students would just like to pass along the message that whatever can be done to make sure that throughout the district, district conversations and individual staff meetings and things like that, these staff members are involved in work that really does work to protect their peace and their space as individuals who are already singled out in a lot of educational settings. So that's just the message I wanted to pass along, because we've been having conversations about that. And these are the ones who are really showing up and sticking up for a lot of our students. And it's clear that they need that support too. So yeah, that's all I have to share with you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Violet. And that brings us to Yoseline.
Hi, I'm Yoseline. I'm from Churchill High School. Violet covered a lot, but just to kind of add on to our Black Excellence and Spirit Week, we did do a spirit week this week, and it's still going on. So yesterday we had like an all blackout day. We wear all black, and then we had a Divine Nine like for the fraternities and sororities. So like each grade like wore their color, and then tomorrow will be Dress to Impress, and then our Friday will be Hoods Up for Trayvon Martin. And yeah, I think Violet covered everything else, like our panelists for Black History Month and Black Excellence Week at Churchill. But we started doing our student government meetings at lunch, and we had our first one this month, and we're going to start having them monthly. There were actually a lot more students than expected, and it went really well, I think. We're starting to organize and assemble Mike's Closet at our high school, which is our clothing closet, and we're trying to make it pretty nice, and we're gonna like add some racks and like some like nice clothing racks, like spin in like circles. That's what we're trying to do, and we're trying to organize all that right now. And then we're trying to increase the student community and activities. So we recently had our unified basketball game, I think 2 Fridays ago, and it went really well. Like everyone showed up. It was amazing. And you guys probably saw on the news if you guys watched the news, but it was amazing. And everyone that went had so much fun, and I had so much fun, and it was just amazing. Sorry. And then we are working on prom. We're planning prom right now, and we're planning for May 7th. Hopefully, we're finding venues, and I think we're gonna go, the seniors in leadership are gonna go tour what venue we like the most. We're planning that. And then we're working on just trying to make a normal year for seniors, trying to plan a senior breakfast. And yeah, so we're trying to plan that right now, but I think that's all. Oh, and we have I don't know, Noah, if you're interested in this, but there's a support for BIPOC teens that meets once a week, I think on Wednesdays. And I can get more information and email it if you would like it, to like have those resources at your own school or read in the announcements. But it's support for BIPOC teens. It's a virtual meeting, so it's like easier to access, but yeah. And then I just have the same concern with the mask lifting soon. I just wanted to know what our 4J rules were going to be around that, but that's it. That's all I have.
Great, thank you.
I just wanted to say that would be great if you could forward that to me. Sorry, I was eating, so I had to take a second, but that would be great. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And I think Joanna is not here. She was with us earlier at our work session and participated on our racial harassment policy work session. So I think she had to make a choice. I'm giving her a second. Lisa, I don't think she's here, so I don't see her name or her face. So we will move along then. The next item on our agenda is to hear from the public, items raised by the audience. The school board receives written comments by email at board@4j.lane.edu and sets aside time in each regular board meeting to hear public comment. Community members can sign up to speak to the board by submitting their request online at 4j.lane.edu/board/public comment, or contact the superintendent's office. The deadline is Monday before each meeting. Individual speakers are limited to 3 minutes and cannot give their time to another speaker. A timekeeper will show a sign when the speaker, well, we have our timer up now on the screen, and we'll give you a warning 30 seconds before you end, and then when your time's up. Speakers may offer objective comments or criticisms about district operations and programs. For complaints about individuals, the district has a board policy and complaint process. Please contact the superintendent's office at 541-790-7706 for more information about submitting a formal complaint. So tonight, we had 10 people signed up, but I think we have 8. And I'm going to let Carrie, since Carrie Delph announce them and usher them in, because you see you have them on your screen.
We do, and the first speaker is here, Colin Johnson. And Colin, you can turn on your microphone and video for your 3 minutes to begin. The next speaker will be Don Leslie.
Thank you again, as always, board members, Interim Superintendent Van de Kar, for the opportunity to speak in this forum. My name is Colin, and while, as my accent suggests, I am from over 4,000 miles away, I am really proud to be a community member here in Eugene. I hold graduate degrees in law and education, and I've been using both of them since moving here. Firstly, I remain beyond impressed by our student representatives. The professionalism in which they conduct themselves in these board meetings is absolutely fantastic. And as a teacher, I love seeing students like that given the opportunity to speak. However, my primary point tonight relates to Interim Superintendent Van de Kar's employing of a new Assistant Superintendent recently with less than 24 hours notice. Now, in any situation, this timescale would be incredibly problematic, but the facts of this case make it more so. So my understanding is that there has been an empty Assistant Superintendent position for instruction in the district for many months, at least since October. And I'm aware that this vacancy has been raised at board level a number of times, most recently by Board Member Rabassa on the 2nd of February. However, less than 48 hours after this meeting, we had a new Assistant Superintendent who happened to be a close friend of our current interim. So a few questions. How is it possible that there were no plans to recruit as of the 2nd of February, but by the 4th of February this position was filled? With relating to that, when and where was the position advertised? How many candidates applied? When were interviews held? Were references being confirmed? And did Interim Superintendent Van de Kar have knowledge of these hiring plans, which she chose not to share with the board 2 days earlier? Now, to be very clear, I am not questioning the new Assistant Super's ability or qualifications, but the timescales and surrounding facts require investigations of what appears to be a potential breach of professional ethics. A second point relating to the racial harassment policies we discussed in the work session. The hate and bias response team, this must be included in the reporting and administrative action section of policy. Any response team should be made up of both district staff and community members. Secondly, the ease of reporting must be increased. Why are there no anonymous options? As it stands, the safe tip line goes to the police, and why would students who are already over-policed by these communities be expected to increase reporting this way? You'll note that the letter Interim Superintendent Van de Kar spoke about earlier was anonymous. I think that speaks volumes. Finally, very quickly, I'm pleased to hear Chair Newman talk about the board working much better together. What I didn't hear was that in order to heal rifts, when harms were perpetrated, appropriate apologies and restorative actions must be made. And to that end, we have yet to hear any apologies from Board Member Walston. Thank you all. I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you. The next speaker is Don Leslie. It should be followed by Marion Malcolm if she is here at that time, and if not, it will move to Rita Gillihan.
Thank you. Dear Superintendent Van de Kar and 4J school board members, I am deeply concerned about recent events at our local high schools brought to my attention by my son, who is a member of North Eugene High School's Black Student Union, and also brought to my attention by one of our longtime family friends, a person of color who is currently being personally and horrifically targeted with racial and misogynist harassment. Simultaneously, I've been receiving repeated emails from North Eugene High School's principal letting me know about racist, anti-Semitic graffiti at North with repeated assertions of zero tolerance. Although as the months wear on and more of these attacks keep occurring, I am wondering what zero tolerance actually means. I appreciate the board's willingness to consider implementing a racial harassment policy, and I hope that you will make that policy strong and transparent. To stand behind the concept of zero tolerance, the policy should apply to staff, volunteers, and board members. I am a female consulting engineer, and I have had cause to appreciate that my employers have had my back when harassment occurs on job sites perpetrated by vendors or at conferences perpetrated by clients. I would hate to have to feel alone in those situations, and our school students certainly should not be left to navigate abuse alone, regardless of whether staff, students, or board members are committing it, or members of the community, of course. I also support a strong definition of the hate and bias response team's role and composition. I serve on the Santa Clara Community Organization and on its Social Justice Committee. And while I am not speaking for them today, I can assure you that we have very concerned neighborhood members who will be capable and willing to serve and supportive of keeping 4J students comfortable and safe. This transparency is important for sending a message about this zero tolerance, both to the wider community and to white supremacists who obviously live among us. I've raised other questions in a previous letter to you regarding that same hate and bias response team. How will the district ensure that folks comprising that team are adequately trained? What will happen with perpetrators when they are located? How can we ensure that restorative justice or similar such techniques are implemented? Will trauma-informed healing be included in the outcomes for targeted students and for any students that are impacted by the damaging effects of hate and bias in their school? Will it be easy for students or parents to report attacks, whether personal or general? Many students are impacted by racist, sexist, anti-Semitic, homophobic, and all other biased, hateful, bullying attacks, graffiti, and the like. And of course, students are part of wider communities, so we're all impacted. I urge you to craft a strong policy with these features as soon as possible. Thank you all for your service to our community and for your attention to this matter.
Thank you.
Thank you. Marion Malcolm is not present, so we've moved on to invite Rita Gillihan. Here she is.
Good evening. Good evening, 4J board members and Superintendent Vandekar. I have two students who are in the Eugene Gakuen Japanese Immersion Program K-12, which is what I'm speaking about tonight. Parents have recently learned that the school district has decided that the current North Eugene High School building will not, be utilized for either Kelly Middle School or Eugene Gakuen Elementary School that had been previously stated. The options shared to parents were that YG could continue to reside within the Kelly Middle School building or move to the Willard site. However, if the YG moved to the Willard site, the district would continue to have the YG students feed into Kelly Middle School and North Eugene High School, which are across town from Willard. This would be a hardship for families with students in different grades to provide transportation across Eugene. There was also no mention to parents of planned additional facility improvements to the Kelly building to go from YG being temporarily housed in the Kelly building to a long-term or permanent placement. I would like to ask that the board engage with YG families regarding the sudden change in future location of the program so that we can be a part of the conversation. YG is a choice school, and YG families are concerned that the program will diminish if the needs of families are not considered. In the meeting tonight, you'll be discussing the 4J Vision 2020. One goal listed is parent satisfaction with school communication, engagement, and transparency. Please take into account the past and current handling of the displacement of the YG program in working to reach this goal. YG families have been advocating over years to strengthen the Japanese immersion program to make it comparable to the other immersion schools in the 4J school district and want to continue to be a part of that conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker, Rose Wilde, is coming in as a panelist now. She'll be followed by Roscoe Karen.
Hi. Looks like you're ready. Okay, good evening. I'm Rose Wilde, and I'm a parent of a 5th grader in 4J. And I'm here to talk about the racial harassment policy. So I learned about the racial harassment policy because of the organizing and advocacy of the Education Justice Action Team, to whom I'm very grateful, several months ago, but I only represent myself. I'm here to uplift and support some of the feedback that I've learned from listening to members of this team and from others. And their wisdom comes from direct experiences of hate and bias attacks, which has helped me understand more deeply how this policy might play out once adopted. I'm also here because I am committed to ending white supremacy so that we can all be free. And although I bear the benefit of white privilege, I've also learned this privilege is no gift, but an insidious lie, which left unchecked would have denied me the joy, learning, wonder, and connection of a truly inclusive society. And I want my child to have that different experience. But we have to keep leaning in, as you have. I see you leaning in to make these changes. And I can see how hard you're working. So I want to thank you and all the staff that have been working on this and continue to hash out these changes. I do have a few suggestions that I would like to pass along. And this includes, please include board meetings on the list of school district activities to which this policy applies in the introductory paragraphs. One might infer that board meetings are covered, but it should be explicitly included so that anyone who's attending board meetings can also have the protection of this policy. Second, although policy and procedure are typically addressed in different types of documents, policies versus administrative rules, I suggest that some aspects that might typically be in an administrative rule be included in the board adopted policy, specifically around the staffing of a hate and bias response team to assure a consistent district-wide response to support the implementation of this policy that endures regardless of changes in any of the leadership roles. Third, I also, I believe Colin mentioned this, suggest reporting mechanisms that include anonymous and text-based reporting beyond that of the Safe Oregon hotline, so that students can have an option that's not directly linked to law enforcement, that's still anonymous and text-based. Finally, as the policy is adopted and procedures are developed, maintaining the engagement of the community and allowing students and people impacted by racism and other forms of oppression is going to be critical. As the district is learning and adopting restorative and transformative processes, these connections with vulnerable students, staff, and community will sustain this valuable partnership and allow for the transformation you all envision. I was at the Churchill United basketball game and it was amazing. 3 cheers for that. That was the most positive thing I've been to in a long time. So see.
Thank you. Marian Malcolm is here now and is coming in as a panelist. She will be followed by Roscoe Karen.
Marian, we can't hear you. Great.
Okay.
Perfect.
Good evening, board members and Superintendent Vandekar. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. I'm a former teacher, the mother of a 4J teacher, and the grandmother of several 4J students. And I want to talk, as others have, about the racial harassment policy, and to say that I'm extremely pleased that you're seriously considering it, and also very pleased that you've included community partners in the process of developing it. I am eager to see it pass as soon as feasible, but I think it's more important to get it right than to pass it before the important elements are all included. And I've been following this, so I want to mention 3 areas where I would like you to do some former work. One is, I agree with the idea that the hate and bias response team needs to be incorporated directly in the policy in the section on reporting and administrative action. And I strongly hope that the response team will include community members from targeted communities. I believe that individuals who've had negative institutional experiences will be more likely to report if they can report to someone not on the district staff. I listened to the work session just now, and I heard questions raised about whether or not community members would be available in a timely fashion, and also about confidentiality. I think both of these issues can easily be addressed. I think most people have cell phones and are reachable very readily. And I also think that the individuals who might be willing to be on such a team are perhaps people with flexible schedules that would allow them to respond quickly. The confidentiality issue is also very easy to address. It's as simple as asking people to sign a confidentiality agreement. I also think that there is still work to do in making the reporting more accessible. And I think there does need to be an opportunity for students to report by text. I understand, because I listened to your work session, that that is not something that you currently have set up. But I think it's a question of priority and it's a question of will. I think the reporting by text that goes to Safe Oregon won't quite do the trick, because that goes to law enforcement, and that isn't going to build confidence for many students. I also agree that the policy should explicitly apply to staff, volunteers, and board members, as well as students. And I hope that you'll keep the community involved as all of this develops, because as you know, a lot of us care a lot, and we would really like to see maximum transparency within the district. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Roscoe Karen is coming in now. He'll be followed by Chelsea Hardrath.
Members of the board, Superintendent Vandekar, my name is Roscoe Karen. I'm a retired 4J teacher and a member of CAPE. I want to echo what Colin had to say about the incredible high quality commentary by the student representatives. I was floored. Senator Lou Frederick is a hero of mine. He represents Northeast Portland. He has lived a full life indeed as a primary grade teacher, TV reporter, actor, PhD candidate, student at MIT and Morehouse, director of communications for the Portland school system, and as an Oregon legislator for the last 13 years. He is the main author of Oregon's opt-out law, a national model, and he has played a key role in challenging the standardized testing craze as an African-American legislator who never bought the testing industry's marketing of their products as essential to deal with the achievement gap. His take on it is simple. We already know about inequitable academic outcomes. We've known it for years. All of this constant testing does nothing to change it. All of this testing has done nothing to change it. His recent bill, Senate Bill 1583, is aimed at reducing the crushing impact of smarter balanced testing. It would compel the ODE to minimize the amount of summative testing and apply for a waiver from the feds to that effect. Senate Bill 1538 provides direction to an ODE which needs direction. While the ODE's words of late indicate some second thoughts about the testing system that it has championed for years, the ODE has not seriously pursued the provisions under 2015's federal ESSA to apply for a waiver as an innovative assessment state. The ODE let its promising 2016 PADS and OFAST, as they were known, pilot projects die on the vine after 1 year. These popular statewide pilot projects, which Springfield took advantage of, trained teachers to develop high quality, teacher-developed curriculum-based student engaging assessments. And the ODE has not seriously pursued the blueprint for a healthier assessment system in its own 2015 New Path comprehensive study of assessments. The ODE seemingly cannot change its ways without being forced to. Certainly, there is little, if any, pressure to do so coming from local school boards, so we need Senate Bill 1583. Oregon, and I would add 4J, have lost their way. We are stuck. We are on the wrong path. SB 1583 takes a few steps in a healthier direction. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chelsea Hardrath is coming in now, and the final speaker will be Larry Lewin.
Good evening. I apologize. I'm at my kids' basketball event, so I'm just reading from the car. Dear school board members, thank you for your time and commitment to our community. Tonight, you will be reviewing the current and proposed 4J policies regarding racial harassment, hate symbols, and bias incidents. As stated in the documentation, these policies seek to prevent and prohibit all forms of racially harassing conduct in district programs and activities, even if the conduct does not include intent to harm. As you review these policies and documents, I would encourage you to keep in mind the Asian and Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander demographic. This demographic represents 3% of our district students and 3% of our district's teachers. As many of you now know or may have heard, the long-term facilities plan for Eugene Gakuen is yet back up for discussion and interpretation. As far as I'm aware, all other schools in the districts have had a short-term or long-term plan, except YG. In 2018, the decision to move YG to Kelly was made. In the summer of 2020, YG was relocated to Kelly Middle School. At that time, there were 3 remaining future plans for YG, YG to Old North, Kelly to Old North, or the 2 schools remain co-located. While there were many hurdles to moving YG to the Kelly building, one hurdle was the history of the building, which it was erected after Captain Colin Kelly, a War II B-17 pilot who flew bombing runs against the Japanese. Symbols and representations of Mr. Kelly remain to this day. On the outside of the Kelly building, there is a B-17 propeller. On one of the gym floors, the word bombers appears on it. While the intent to harm is surely not on the minds of most after COVID, I do wonder about these things. We are just 80 years on the anniversary of Executive Order 9066, which was signed, paving the way for the US to relocate Japanese to relocation centers. So now here we are today talking about relocating the YG Japanese immersion program, potentially removing it from the North region and housing it into the South at Willard. As the nation's first Japanese immersion program, 34 years old, I hope that the policies you review tonight are inclusive to the needs of our community and our Asian demographic. Additionally, tonight on the agenda, you will be looking and reviewing at the KPI for the Vision 2020 strategic plan. I encourage you to look at the original plan and drill down to some of the specific objectives and key tactics. Goal 2, Objective 1, Key Tactics, improving articulation of the immersion programs and investigation of potential expansion of the immersion programs. Goal 2, Objective 2, Key Tactics, developing a vision process for the districts, regions, beginning at the North region. Thank you for your time and service.
Thank you.
Larry Lewin is the final speaker, and I see him coming in now. Thank you.
I'm Larry Lewin, retired district elementary and middle school teacher, now a member of CAPE. Thank you, school board members and Superintendent Sidney, for this opportunity to speak. I continue to support our district's COVID health mandates, and thank you for keeping our kids and staff safe. Over the years, I have spoken to you and previous boards and superintendents about my concerns over standardized testing, so much so that I believe I may have been labeled as anti-testing. I assure you that I'm not anti-testing. I was a teacher, and teachers invented testing. But I am an anti-overuse of standardized testing advocate because it robs students of their worth as learners, it robs them of instructional time, and it shortcuts what useful assessments can do. 2 bills are making their way through the state legislature, as was just announced previously. One bill will require the ODE, the Oregon Department of Education, to seek federal approval to reduce the spring summative smarter balanced standardized tests through a sampling model instead of universally testing all students. The second bill facing in the legislature will require Oregon school districts, including 4J, to take an inventory of all the standardized tests they administer that aren't federally or state mandated, which, by the way, are the lion's share of all standardized tests. I support both these bills because they will cause a broader discussion in our state and here in Eugene about what types of assessments are best for teachers to use when figuring out what their students know and can do and what they can't yet do. The overuse of standardized testing at the federal, state, and local levels has severely reduced teacher and principal input into our assessment system. It ranks as a cause of teacher burnout and dropout. It is surely not the only reason we are faced with a teacher staffing crisis, but it is a real factor. Professor Alyssa Hadley Dunn of Michigan State University's Teacher Education Department wrote recently, "It isn't just the pandemic that's driving teachers to leave. The pandemic is exacerbating teachers' feelings of being silenced. They feel like they have no voice in what happens in their classrooms and no say over policy implementation, even in a public health crisis. Leaders of 4J, it is way past time we address this crisis and find ways to honor, respect, and use the professional wisdom of our frontline school-based staff." Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. I think that's it, right, Carrie?
Yes, that was our final member of the public speaking. We do have employee groups providing comment.
Great. I know we have Sabrina Gordon here from EEA.
Judy, thank you. Sorry, I actually need just a moment if you would like somebody else to go first.
So we have EEA providing comment, and I believe not from MAPS or OSEA today.
Okay, give me a second.
We'll give you a second.
Okay. Okay, I'm ready. Good evening, members of the board and Superintendent Vanderkar. My name is Sabrina Gordon, and I am president of Eugene Education Association. Tonight, I want to share with you a message of relief and gratitude after reaching a tentative agreement last week in contract negotiations between EEA and 4J. There is a definite sense of relief felt by EEA's bargaining team after months of work and extra hours spent negotiating. I imagine the members of the district's team feel this relief as well. Every one of us has other important work to do, and it feels good to have almost wrapped up this important but extremely time-consuming task. And the members of EEA are relieved to be able to focus on the work they do in classrooms each day or supporting the work in classrooms after going through the first half of this school year without a contract. Our tentative agreement represents a collaborative effort between EEA and 4J to improve student learning conditions and compensate licensed educators in a way that recognizes our professionalism. Some of the learning conditions addressed in this agreement are protected time for developing lessons and providing student feedback, support for teams who create IEP and 504 plans for students, and support for student enrichment programs such as affinity groups, career technical education, language immersion, and outdoor school. The salary increase in this tentative agreement is intended to help retain and attract licensed staff in 4J. As the educator workforce crisis continues nationwide, this is a wise investment by the district. And now I'll share some gratitude. First, to the 4J School Board. Thank you for hearing us. Thank you for supporting a fair contract settlement that acknowledges the value of 4J educators. And I'd like to thank the 4J bargaining team for their willingness to dig into some important issues and work collaboratively for the benefit of our students. I'm also grateful for the parents, students, and community partners who shared an interest in contract negotiations and understood the importance of the district and association reaching a fair settlement. And last but not least, I am grateful to be one of nearly 1,000 4J members of the Eugene Education Association. Our members demonstrated their willingness to stand together in this bargain, spending extra time to communicate needs to the school board, showing up in red to bargaining sessions, and joining Zoom by the hundreds to listen in as we worked together toward a settlement. 4J is made stronger by the collective efforts of passionate educators, administrators, and school board members. And when this agreement is hopefully ratified next week and approved by this board, we can all put our full energy back into the reason we're here every day, for our students. Thank you.
Thank you, Sabrina. And now it's time for our school board members' comments. Who would like to go first? Martina.
Yeah, I can start. So this week, as always, there's a lot to say and consider, but my mind is really occupied right now by what's happening in Texas. Yesterday, the governor of Texas banned gender affirming care for trans and gender diverse youth, and the harm that this is already causing is apparent. In Texas, fully supporting trans and gender diverse kids is now being considered child abuse, even though all of the available data and research shows that ensuring access to gender affirming support is one of the best ways to prevent suicidal thoughts and actions amongst trans youth. Is the best way that we can respect and honor the trans kids in our lives. And we're not in Texas, but seeing this kind of state violence become law anywhere in the country is traumatizing for trans and gender diverse students, no matter where they live. So I just wanted to take a moment just to speak to the trans and gender diverse and gender expansive students in this community and say that we see you, I see you, we love you, and we respect you, and we respect that you know who you are, and that it's our job to support you in that. And I want to remind young folks who might be struggling in this moment that there are so many people who are ready and willing and want to support you. So the Oregon Youth Line is available every day. That's at 877-968-8491 or by texting teen to teen to 839-863. And the Trevor Project is available 24/7, talk, text, chat at thetrevorproject.org.
Thank you. Who would like to be next? Gordon.
Thank you. First, I'm thrilled to hear that the legislature may help us get rid of some standardized tests. And I want to thank Roscoe Karen and Larry Lewin for their long years of work on this. The main thing I want to talk about tonight is that parents, students, and staff, as some people have already noted at YG and Kelly, are now being told they have to choose between just two options for their long-term future: remain squeezed together in one building forever, or have YG move to the Willard site in South Eugene, which will be disruptive to the North Region Language Immersion track. But this is very different from what parents were told when this first happened. When this happened 2 years ago, the district told parents that this would just be a short-term arrangement strictly for the duration of construction of the new North Eugene High School. And that option included the district handing out to parents and staff and the community a document showing the old North Eugene High School labeled as, quote, future space available for Kelly, YG, and Corridor. And a statement that after the new high school is completed, the current North Eugene and Kelly buildings will be available for the long-term location of Kelly, Corridor, and YG. Our bond announcement also included a statement of, quote, $10 million bond funds allocated for program moves, which included $7 million allocated for maintenance repairs on the old North High School and for moves of YG and Corridor. I know that we have limited money. It's my understanding that to bring the old North High School up to code and make it usable would cost over $30 million. But if that's true, it should have also been knowable 2 years ago, and we should have told parents that then. I doubt that many Kelly and YG parents would have voted to support a bond if they were told the result of it would entail being squeezed into one building forever. I want to be clear that this predated interim superintendent Vanderkar and is not in any way her fault or her action. I also don't believe it's the fault of the facilities department. But I do believe this is part of a disturbing pattern of communication from the district communication staff. I complained about this at Camas Ridge, and I see it here again, a pattern of treating the public like people are dumb or can be manipulated, or maybe have such short memories that they won't remember what we told them 2 years ago. But people are not dumb, and it's exactly this kind of bait and switch gaslighting that erodes public trust. I know that money is limited, but in order for us to be in good faith with what the Kelly and YG communities were told, I hope that we can look hard to see if we can come up with money, maybe to just use the newest part of the old North building or to invest somehow in improving and expanding the current Kelly building. Either way, I think we need to deal with people honestly, respectfully, and straightforwardly, and we have to start that by making things right at Kelly and YG. I will ask at the end of this meeting that we put this on the agenda whenever leadership thinks is the right time to be able to take this up as a board item. Thank you.
Thanks, Gordon. It is one of our goals, so who would like to go next? Maya.
Oh, okay.
You can go if you want, Laurel. No worries.
I'm gonna go.
Good, thank you. Good decisiveness.
I'm going to quote from a book that I quote a lot. You can predict a country's performance on one outcome from knowledge of others. For instance, a country does badly on health. If a country does badly on health, you can predict with some confidence it will also imprison a larger proportion of its population, have more teenage pregnancy, lower literacy scores, more obesity, worse mental health, and so on. Inequality seems to make countries socially dysfunctional across a wide range of outcomes. The reason I quote this, the book is called The Spirit Level, by the way, is that I have made it known that I think it's really important that we raise our base wage. Our base wage is, well, like many other school districts, because I've been doing some research, is pretty low. And so the reality, what happens is that those people that keep the district going are seen as, quote, so it's not said, unskilled labor. So they don't get paid as much because they're not professional labor. But the reality is they are skilled labor. They're the ones that, you know, feed us. I still remember my lunch ladies from Spencer Butte. I'm going to say it, junior high. That's how old I am. So these people are important. And I want it to be on our scope for something we can really work on to say, we want to be a leader in this. We want to raise the community up, not just ourselves, but the entire community up by showing base wage is important. And my thought, without doing the economic numbers, which I know there are people more qualified than me to do, hopefully if they're not conservative economists, would be at least $17 to $18 as our minimum wage we pay somebody. I think it make a vast difference, and it would strengthen our entire district. And we have people right now that have worked for us for over 20 years that make $20. So that's a problem. And so that's my thing I want to talk on today. That's what is weighing on me and something I hope to change in the time that I'm here. And I hope my fellow board members will be willing to listen as I talk about this quite a bit. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So Maya.
Thank you. So over the past few weeks, I have been immersed in absorbing information from some of our key stakeholders, students and staff. So tonight I offer you a recap of what I have learned, because it's not enough to just listen, it's also my job to amplify. So pardon me, but I have a lot to share. In this meeting, I will prioritize mostly student voice. I started off with a delightful meeting with Yoselin Godinez, my student board representative partner. A big thank you goes to Mr. Ogden for sharing his classroom with us so we could meet in person and have the chance to get to know one another. One thing we discussed is a plan to connect our student reps outside of our board meeting space, and I'm excited to see this plan take form. Big props also to Churchill for your Hoods Up for Trayvon Martin movement. This is a really big deal. Students have been prevented from engaging similar movements in the past, and I'm really proud of you all for persevering. After that meeting, I headed over to North, where I had the privilege of connecting one-on-one with a 10th grade student. Hearing this student's story showcased the undeniable need for us to ensure the work our students do feels meaningful and is work to which they feel a connection, instead of feeling it is arbitrary, failing to spark joy or inspire learning. If work is devoid of meaning, too many of our students will not thrive and are in danger of being actively harmed as learners. The stress imparted by piles and piles of work from which they are disconnected is daunting and is impacting our students' mental health. This is particularly true for our students who are receiving services from our Student Services Department. We can do better, and one way to do this is by insisting that our Student Services Department is not operating in isolation. Our SSD needs to be brought into the work instruction is charged with, folded into the mix, and valued for its distinct expertise, insight, and ideas. I want to thank the Student Council at Holt Elementary for inviting the board and superintendent to attend a meeting to learn about school lunch. I learned there are some menu items that are passionately longed for and seem to come around less frequently than students would like. I learned that the time allotted to eat and socialize is far too short. I learned that 100% of the group has either left lunch still hungry or knows someone who has. I learned that 100% of the group has also either left lunch having eaten nothing or knows someone who has. I learned that students know their work in class, their focus in classwork is compromised because they are hungry. And I learned that students are coming up with creative ways to help their friends who they know are hungry. I'm impressed with these students' compassion-fueled action to take support to support their hungry friends and classmates. And I'm thankful for all the problem solving that has generated ideas to improve our nutrition services, but I am very concerned that this is an adult problem to solve and not a burden our children should have to bear. I'm confident we can find ways to deliver food to our students that leaves them both satisfied and full, ready for afternoons of engaged learning. So thank you, Holt Student Council, for inviting us and sharing your insight, and I hope you do so again. To round out those voices, I spent a chunk of time at both Madison and Cal Young middle schools, meeting with 6 classes. I got to see learning in action and engage in some invigorating conversations. I learned what makes school meaningful and what makes school challenging. I was humbled by students' bravery in opening up to me, in some cases sharing some very personal details. To sum things up, these middle school students, like their elementary counterparts, would like to see more food options and more time to eat and socialize with friends. They are eager to learn what will be happening with masks. They are concerned about the amount of plastics wasted in our school system. They love electives, especially the ones that have them using their hands or moving their bodies. And as our student reps reported on earlier, they are keenly aware that they are in dire need of more mental health support. They are worried about themselves and their peers, and they are deeply grateful for affinity groups and for the educators with whom they feel deep connections. According to the students, these educators make a world of difference. They always have, but right now, they are quite literally saving our students. I'm almost done. And while we're on the subject of middle schoolers, I hear over and over from teachers and students that Kelly Middle School students are thirsty. How can we ensure that while water fountains are shut down, Kelly and any other school in need that we haven't heard from yet is supplied with cups so our students can drink the water they need to stay hydrated? This is a fundamental biological need that we are letting go unsupported and feels solvable. Let's do this. Finally, I was invited to meet with the majority of Eugene Gockwin teachers and some classified staff, and on a different occasion, some Kelly teachers. Listening to these staff members and parent Rita Gillahan tonight, it is clear that it is imperative that as a board, we support these 2 programs in holding a listening session to hear directly from the folks who are impacted by whatever decision the district makes regarding the future of these programs. This decision must be informed by all the voices in these communities, not just those in charge of decision-making. Without a shared understanding of needs, desires, and visions, there will be no healing from the process that brought them under one roof, and we will be in danger of perpetuating harm on both programs. This is one of our board goals, and it's time we jumped into it. Thank you.
Thanks, Maya. And Alicia.
Thanks, Judy. Couple things. One, thank you, Larry and Roscoe, for talking about the 2 bills, and I really am hoping our legislative committee can review those and we can figure out when we can have a report back. I'm pretty excited that something might actually happen. And the other thing is we do need to talk about YG. I believe we need to support YG in its articulation through 8th grade. We need options, and I absolutely support Gordon's plan to put this on our agenda. And in more than just listening, we need to act, because I agree, we did make promises. I was there, and I would like to see this solved in the most effective way. Thank you, Martina, for sharing about Texas. I was actually in Texas last week. Yeah, kind of feel it. But it is really important that you put your voice forward for our trans students and our youth in our community, because I know it's scary and they're hurting. Both videos, just gotta say, were wonderful. I'm sorry I didn't bring a video this evening, but both of yours were. And I want to just say thank you for the superintendent for sharing that anonymous letter from the student. The concern that student brought forward is a concern I have shared in the past. And I am wanting this conversation, not just to continue, but to figure out how we support our teachers in what they do choose to use and how they do teach the classics without, when you're the only one of one in the classroom, it's pretty scary to hear discussions like To Kill a Mockingbird and some of those others. So how are we supporting our instructors, our teachers in doing that in the most effective way? So that's my thoughts. Thank you. Oh, I did not have any committee or subcommittee meetings in the last week. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. So I think we are at the point to look at the consent agenda. Do I have a motion for the consent agenda?
I move approval of the consent agenda.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Alicia seconds. So Martina moved and Alicia seconded the consent. Is there any discussion? Laurel.
I'm trying to understand why the new appointments wouldn't be on the consent agenda by now, since it's been a few weeks.
Is Karen, or I don't put those records together, but maybe Christine or Karen knows when you would expect them. Christine, or is Karen on here?
I am also, I don't know why they're not on the agenda. I can't speak to why they're not there. I'm sorry.
Okay, so I know it's not a weekly catch when we put stuff on the consent agenda for hires and people who have resigned or have been let go. So I will find out that order of business and share it out on Friday. I don't know I guess the schedule or when that happens.
I just think it's important that it happens in a timely way. So thanks, and I'll be happy to see it when it gets there, hopefully by the next board meeting.
Thank you. We'll get a report back. Any other discussion on the consent agenda motion? Then I'll call the vote. All those in favor of passing it, please raise your hand. Be the easiest thing on here. Okay, I see a unanimous vote then. Of all 6 people are voting yes. And so the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Now we're on to items for information, and the first item is receiving an update on key performance indicators for 4J Vision 2020 strategic plan. And I'll ask the superintendent to introduce that item.
Sure. So just for the board's listening pleasure, every once in a while, we'll drop that key performance indicator to a KPI. So they mean the same thing to us, and we'll try to say the whole thing out loud, but these were established in 2017, and 2020 didn't mean that they were finished in the year 2020, but we picked the name because it was like a clear vision, like when you go get your eyes checked in your 2020, you don't have to wear glasses. So the 2020 doesn't really mean a year. And I think in a minute, you're gonna have a slide. I probably could just keep talking. So if you could go to the next slide, please. So there are 5 goals, and this was a community process in 2017, and I would say that a good portion of the sitting board wasn't part of that process. So we are working on goals that were created a while ago, 5 years ago, and perhaps we should put some time into creating ones with the community that are more relevant to today. But we're working off of the goals that are currently in place. So goal 1 is equitable access and outcomes for every student. And some things have changed with the KPI, the key performance indicators. And one of those is 40-40-20, which was something that the state of Oregon put into play, and now it's discontinued. So that was one way that we would measure it, but you won't see that today. Attendance data is still there. And then we have 2 3rd grade and 9th grade. We look at those as indicators on track to graduate. And then you'll see the suspension and expulsion rates. Right before the COVID hit, we were working on our expulsion policy and have had little chance to try it out. And so you'll see some suspension and expulsion rates that are partly affected by being online, and then this year would be a regular year, but it's not included because we're not to the end of it yet. So the second goal that I didn't mention, though, is multiple pathways to student success, which would include career technology, CTE, and we would guide it on if we're ready for success as a postgraduate. So you'll see that information. Goal 3 is communication and connection with community. We have some numbers for you. And during COVID, really our communication department communicated all the time from here. And so we use those metrics. And then a survey that we put out, but we didn't do it during COVID because we were sending out lots of other surveys regarding the actual virus. So goal 4, diverse workforce. We have been working really hard in finding ways to build our own, to make sure that people feel supported in their jobs, and we start on all ends of that. And so you'll see retention rates and our diversity rates. And then goal number 5 is a stable, sustainable stewardship. And that's our budget and what we do with our budget. So you'll see our reserve levels. We'll talk about class sizes and the ratios. And one of them that was really important during COVID was how many devices we could give to kids so that each kid had a 1-to-1 device ratio during CDL. So, and then long range facilities plans. So what I would like to do, though, is turn it over, next slide, to Oscar, and Oscar will talk about our graduation and completion rates. You've seen these spelled out, and is Oscar there? Can I hear you?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So Oscar, this one's yours.
Yeah. So as the superintendent just mentioned, the first 2 key performance indicators are related to graduation outcomes, and we'll talk about them in a recent meeting. As you may remember, and you see in this table, our 4-year graduation rate or on-time graduation rate has been growing significantly since 2013 at the district level and in each individual high school. But it had a drop in 2021, partially but not completely explained by the fact that in 2019-2020, the guidance from ODE regarding the assignment of credit changed due to the sudden closure of schools. And when we look at the data, we disaggregated by student group. And in this table, you see that for almost all student groups in 4J, there was very significant growth in 4-year graduation rate from 2013 to 2021, but with a drop in 2021 compared to 2020. Also, you can see here that the groups that had the most improvement in graduation rates are some of the student groups that are have been traditionally most underserved, like African American students, students with disabilities, Latino students, English learners, students living with navigating poverty. And the fact that those groups were the ones who improved the most means the gaps in our graduation rate have been reduced significantly since 2013. But as you can see in the column for last year, 2021, those gaps are still large, and they tend to be larger in 4J than they are in the state as a whole. And
so Oscar, do you want to take questions as we go, or do you?
Yes,
Yes, because I see Laurel has her hand up.
So I'm trying to understand the slides and I don't see a key anywhere that tells me what the numbers are, meaning what they're referring to. Are they part of 100 or how many people, or just the other Black African students? I'm looking at the top of the current slide. I don't know any of that. And I can tell you when I went to 4J schools, I got in trouble if I didn't put that on my graphs.
I agree, that's what happened there. So these are graduation rates, 4-year graduation rates. That is the percentage of students who after of 4 years after they enter high school had obtained either a regular diploma or a modified diploma. And you can see just in the first row, our African American students in 2012, 2013, so the class of 2013 had only 46% of them graduated after 4 years, while in the class of 2021 is 75%. So that the next column is the difference, how much it grew from 13 to 20. That is used as a reference because in 2020, we reached our highest graduation rate ever. And then the last column is the growth or the change from 2013 to 2021. I hope that helps.
That does. And yeah, if you could give a key for the other ones as well, that'd be helpful.
Yes. And the next thing we do is compare the graduation, this 4-year graduation rate or on-time graduation rate in 4J and the state. And you can see the state had a similar trend, great growth over time in the graduation rate, but a drop last year. And also the graduation rate in Oregon is higher than for 4J. Another indicator that we look at related to graduation outcomes is the 5-year completion rate. That's the percentage of students that who 5 years after they started high school had earned either a regular diploma or a modified diploma or also a GED. And you can see that that rate reached in 4J an all-time high last year of 88.2% and is higher in 4J than in the state. And when we look at the data, we analyze the data, we also look at the factors that had an influence on the graduation rates. And in this slide, you can see two that we talked about in the previous meeting. One is the percentage of 9th graders who are on track to graduate on time by the end of 9th grade. That until now has been a very reliable predictor of graduation rate 3 years later. And also student engagement in career and technical education, CTE. And you can see here that every year CTE participants and CTE concentrators have a higher graduation rate than the overall for all students. And CTE participant is defined by ODE, or it was, now the definition is changing, but it was defined by ODE as students who get a passing grade in at least one CTE class, while CTE concentrators are students who have taken at least 2 CTE classes in the same program. So they are in their way to complete a CTE pathway.
All right, so what you're looking at here, so by definition, a suspension is a removal from the classroom. So a kid is taken away from where their peers are. It could be in school, it could be out of school. So I was really hoping that we'd have a different chance to see if our policy and our ways that we changed the policy would look in real life, but really you can't compare it to last year where there are 0 expulsions. We just simply weren't in school. So we were online, but we weren't in school for us to try it out. So last year though, in the short time that we were in brick and mortar starting after spring break, you'll see that we had 1 in-school suspension and 7 out-of-school suspensions. And that last line is per 100 students. So I guess you could say 1 in 1,000 exclusions. So if there's 1,000 students, 1 person was excluded. So you can see over time that it's gone down. This started with Dr. Balderas and a team working together, and we haven't quit. It's just we got sidetracked by the COVID virus, but we're back on it. So I think that if we're lacking things to work on, we could certainly look at the policy again on expulsions and fine tune it. And I think we would like to see the goal to be that we work really hard to not have any. However, I was looking through and I can see that there are some required times when kids wouldn't be at school. I guess we could call it a cooling off period or waiting to just make sure everything's okay. So this is the data, and I think that you can see a big lump in 17-18, and part of that is we weren't recording it the same across the district. So we've put all of our data points together in the same place after we realized it, and so it looks really big, but I doubt that it was any worse or better the years before. It's just it was how we were recording our data and paying attention. So that is.
We have 2 questions. It looks like on
okay.
This. If you were done, it sounded like you were going to move along.
I was, but I also have directors. If it's an elementary question, Melissa and Jeff are here, and if it's a secondary, Andy's in the background somewhere.
We don't have this slide. Do other people have this slide? I don't have this.
So the one that was in the packet itself, we realized that the data, one was a percent and one was numbers. And so we were trying to make it clearer. And then we realized that the in-school and the out-of-school were all lumped together. And so we wanted to separate them.
So was this updated and I've just missed it? Do we have it somewhere?
We can get it to you. It was updated, yes.
Okay, so we'll be getting this information then. Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
I can add, this is in the packet online now, if you're looking online rather than on the earlier version that was emailed to you. It is updated on board book, and it is the same information that was in the slide originally is there, and more information breaking down the difference between in-school suspensions, out-of-school suspensions, and expulsions has been added to the information that was there before.
And Judy, we know that this is going to take longer than was planned, so I think we're just going to wait for you to cut us off. You could, I suppose, cut us off at the end of a goal if you want, like maybe when we finish the next slide before we move on to goal 3. So we have 3 more slides, it looks like, on goals 1 and 2. And if you want, we could do a few questions, or it's just up to you when you want us to.
Well, we were hoping to get halfway through tonight. So if you can signal me when we're halfway through, and it looks like Maya has a question on this slide.
Okay.
So help me read this, Sydney or whoever.
Yeah.
It's requiring me to do a little math, so I acknowledge the challenge on my part. So when it says number of exclusions per student per 100 students, we have what, 16,000 students, is that correct?
Approximately, yes.
Okay, so those numbers are when you do the math, even if you do it ballpark, they're pretty much bigger than those numbers right there. Now, my question is, number of exclusions, do all three of these categories count as exclusions? I mean, they do in my brain, but I'm just wanting to make sure for the purpose of this chart that they do.
All three count as exclusions. And Oscar, who made the slide, Oscar, do you understand what the question she's asking? What I think is that it doesn't add up to, if you take and multiply it times 16,000, which is an approximate amount as well, that the numbers don't exactly add up. What are we missing? Oscar or anyone?
Oscar, you're muted.
Oh.
Okay, sorry.
It's okay.
I was saying that it should, the calculation there is, since this includes all students in alternative programs, students in charter schools, so it's more than like 1,700. So if you divide 8 by 1,700, you should get rounded 0.1 per 100 students, and the same for every year.
Okay, so Oscar, can you help me with like the easiest one on here, which is 1, and that's the 2020 in-school suspensions. I assume that doesn't mean that only one student in the entire district received an in-school suspension, correct? It's one per 100 students?
No, it's one student. That's what is in our student information system, what was entered and what we submitted to all our data. And the reason for that is that was not the focus of for the year, but that's actually one student received an in-school suspension and 7 received out-of-school suspensions last year.
Okay, so then the total is 8, and 8 equals 0.1 out of 100 students.
Yes.
Thank you for walking me through that chart reading.
I can't see everyone. So is there another hand up, Judy?
There's not another hand up, and I just looked at the presentation. So our plan is to get through goal 2, and we'll stop before goal 3. Okay.
Okay. So Oscar, you have the next couple of, and then we'll be finished. Oh, and then Andy. So Oscar, Jeff, and then Andy. That's our order.
Okay, quickly, what we see here is the percentage of students who were regular attenders every year. And OD defines a regular attender as a student who attends at least 90% of the days. And you can see there that in this table that before the pandemic, there was a slight trend down in our percentage of regular attendance. And ours was slightly lower than for the state as a whole. And then last year, both the state and 4J had a big drop in that percentage. And actually the drop was larger for the state than for 4J. So for the first time, as you can see here, in a long time, our attendance level was higher than for the state as a whole. And also in 2019-20, those data are not comparable because during school closures, we measure attendance differently. We did it weekly instead of daily. So we can compute a number, but it's not comparable to any of the other numbers.
Good evening, Board Chair Newman and members of the board. I'm here to talk about the key performance indicator of third grade reading proficiency. As you can see in our slide, this shows year by year the percentage of third grade students identified as proficient in our Oregon State assessment. And I think one of the things you can see in this chart is a downward trend in third grade proficiency. And in our last 2 years, there is, it doesn't show data in 2020 because we had 0 students completing assessments in that year and very limited participation in 2021. And we know we have a lot of work to do when you look at this data. And while we provided the best educational opportunities that we could during distance learning, it wasn't enough for many of our students. And changing this trend is going to take consistent effort over time. And it's not that we don't have talented and wonderful and amazing teachers. Teaching emergent readers how to read is one of the most difficult tasks that we engage in as K-12 educators. And our student learning needs have changed over time, and we need to respond to those needs. 2 of those levers that we are engaging in now is the adoption of a new language arts curriculum, as well as the professional development grounded in literacy acquisition that will accompany that new language arts curriculum that we bring in. Our elementary language arts adoption team has and piloting teachers are doing tremendous work this year. And they are now moving into that piloting phase, and we'll have final recommendations for curriculum to be implemented in the following school year, along with our long range plans and professional learning to support these efforts moving forward. Over the next several years, we as an elementary education team will continue to learn and grow together so that we can provide each child with everything they need to be successful lifelong readers. And we're hoping that that work has a significant impact on our next performance indicator of 9th grade on track.
Good evening, Andy Dye, Director of Secondary Ed, 4J School District. Oscar referenced this earlier. We do know that entering the first day of 10th grade on track to graduation is highly predictive of graduating within 4 years. And we had fairly consistent increases in our 9th grade on track data all the way through last year. It is significantly lower at 77.4% than it was the prior year at 84.6. Making no excuses, like Jeff said about third grade reading, last year was an incredible struggle for a variety of reasons, not the least of which was that we were, largely out of school for the entire year. So we have been tracking 9th and 10th grade, along with everybody else, of course, but 9th and 10th grade credit acquisition versus credits attempted, changing schedules and intervening just in time when students are not on track to graduate. We'll have another robust summer of programming. Historically, the summer programming was not hugely popular with students, and largely was a way for students to attempt to recover credit that they had not previously earned. In the last several years, we've really tried to change summer programming so that it is, in addition to credit recovery, opportunities that don't exist during the regular school year. So students can bridge the gap between the months of June to September. This is something that we're working on at our high schools with administrators, data teams, and teachers to make sure that we can support students to earn the credits that they've attempted and give them opportunities to recover that credit in the event that they don't earn them. Happy to answer any questions when the time is right.
So Judy, that's the end of goals 1 and 2. So it might be a natural break.
Great. That's what I was thinking when I looked. So Thank you all for the, oh, Laurel's got her hand up. Maybe don't go away, Andy.
Well, I don't know if this goes in with this, but I have noticed, like, so at my son's school at South, they have a homework club, but only for ninth graders, not for anybody else this year, because they said they just don't have the funds for it. Is that one reason we have this for these KPIs? Because I mean, this is something I was asking for all year, and I'm not just saying for me, but I'm like, it seems like something that's not there for all the other students that could use that extra help, not just, you know, the numbers.
I think your question is, do we have homework club? So in response to our KPIs, Laurel, is that what you were?
Kind of, yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Okay, it's been part of our, pardon me, it's homework clubs and opportunities to have teachers have access to have students have access to teachers outside of the contact day has been part of our high school success plan since we received high school success dollars. And to some degree, it existed in schools prior to that. What we've seen is that teachers have felt unable to do that given the needs of planning for their classes in the last couple of years. So I don't know, and I will look into it, whether it's a function of funding that we can find. It may be that teachers, I don't want to say unwilling, but are really unable to dedicate more time outside of the planning for their regular classes. But I can definitely look into it and circle back to you. What we know is that there are students that cannot or choose not to or would prefer not to seek one-on-one help during a class because everybody's right there. Maybe they're embarrassed to ask a question or the pacing of the class isn't right. But we absolutely have had this to some degree in our schools for a number of years. Homework club or OATS, open academic access, or some type of period on a regular basis where kids can access teachers.
Thanks. I mean, I understand after the pandemic why ninth graders who are just coming into high school after not even having their last year at middle school need extra help. I was just, my wonder, I thought it was strange. It was only for them because all my other kids were able to benefit from it. So thanks for looking at that, because that would be helpful. And
Sure.
I don't know if it's happening everywhere. I just know, of course, my microcosm. So if it's happening everywhere, then it's important enough to
I'll look
address.
into it for
If it's
sure.
not only at South, then don't worry about it.
Thank you. Okay, any last questions for this crew? I want to say welcome Mary Walston to the meeting. Glad you could join, and let people know that Gordon left the meeting because he wasn't feeling well. So there's still 6 of us here. The next item for information is to review the budget committee meeting schedule. And this was on the agenda because we added, I think it was 4 meetings to the budget committee, and there was some discussion about having some structure, some framework for those additional meetings. And we just wanted to, first of all, I'm going to ask the superintendent, who I think has touched bases with both the chair and vice chair of the budget committee, Josh Burstein and Juan Carlos. Yeah. And and Andrea has also had some ideas, I think. So let's hear your thoughts, and then we can add ours to the conversation.
Thank you. So as much as I tried, Juan Carlos and I could not match our schedules. So we're still trying. I did spend some time with Josh, and he talked about perhaps the community. It might be helpful to explain how money can be used. So knowing he comes from a system where different budgets can be spent on different things. For example, our bond money can be spent to build things, but it can't be spent on people. But our levy can't be spent on building things and it can only be spent on people. So he thought it might be good to explain the pots of money to the newcomers, just so that everyone understood when we said, well, we can't use that money on that made sense. So that was one of his ideas, and it's something that they do when they're doing their budget where he works. Now, then I met with Andrea, who's on the call. And Andrea, if you want to turn on your screen. Andrea had another idea, which I think probably the board will appreciate both ideas. But Andrea, do you want to take a second and talk about what you consider to be a good idea for one of those meetings?
Hello, everyone. Sorry, I've got a cat on my lap who is purring up a storm here. One of the things I was really impressed with were the 3 categories that were shared by Sabrina Gordon, our EEA president, at the January 24th Budget Committee meeting. And I felt that it might be a great opportunity for the Budget Committee to hear more in these 3 areas from our teachers, from the public, and perhaps be able to explore some potential investments in these areas, prioritize what they would like, what things we should look at first, second, third in each of these topic areas, so that as we dive into building the budget, if there are opportunities and funding sources available, we know what is of the highest priority for the board and the budget committee for us to bring back as part of the proposed budget. But I really felt that it would be wonderful to hear from our teachers and from the public about, more specifics in these topic areas.
And we talked a little bit about pricing something out. So I think we priced out what it would be if every elementary and middle school had a librarian, because that was one of the asks from EEF, maybe EEA as well. So what things cost. So you want this, but what does that cost? Or we want class sizes of 20, what would that cost, right? I think we wouldn't disagree that librarians are pretty amazing, but we just need to be able to pay for what we come up with.
And I think if we heard these areas, we could come back to a future meeting with the costing information and other information about the items, so that the board and the budget committee could look at these, and in their prioritization could look at things that would be actionable, things that are within the realm of possibility, and prioritize what you would like to see us work on first, second, and third in each of these category areas. So that was a thought for a possible way to bring our teachers and the public in and hear more about their needs, and be able to actually take a good look at some of these things and kind of flesh them out a little.
Great suggestion. Thank you.
So I think it would be up to the board what you want to use the time to accomplish, and we'll support you in whatever way you want. I don't know if you want to discuss it or what that looks like, but we do have a meeting coming up.
So do you have any, there we go, Alicia.
Thanks, Andrea, and thanks, Superintendent. I'm wondering if we want to review the budget now that we have, or will hopefully soon have, a settled contract, because I know that things were moved around and reserves were used and so forth. And so just to get, I think at our next meeting, if possible, to get a clear understanding of where the budget is now would be helpful. I don't want to invite people in and give false hope. So, I appreciate hearing, but I think hearing with the understanding of what is real and what is possible and what isn't possible. I wish everything was possible, as all of you do. But so my first request, if possible, would be to go over the budget as it stands now, that we have committed more money to salaries, and then move on after that if we want people to come in and talk. Thanks.
Thank you. Mary.
I was just going to bring up the same thing that Alicia did, so I just would agree with her. I'm glad that it looks like we're reaching a settlement with EEA, but as we know, it's going to cost money this year and next year, and I think a reassessment or a retelling of exactly where we are with the budget, given those, I guess, promises we've made, since it hasn't been approved yet, would be helpful for the budget committee meeting. Because I don't want to raise hope and have people think there's a bunch of money to spend on a bunch of new initiatives. So thank you, Alicia. I agree with you.
Thanks, Mary. Maya.
Okay. I really appreciate, Andrea, when you were talking about bringing in folks and their perspective on ways that our budget could be used. I think it would be really important for us to, as a budget committee, have a preliminary conversation, maybe at the same meeting where we hear a revamp of the budget, perhaps, before we even embark on that, about how we bring in community, and really thinking deeply about the fact that prior to being on the board, I know I attended a few budget committee meetings, but not many. And every time I did, there was myself and maybe Tad Shannon, who was Sabrina's predecessor. So while we have a system in place, it's not a system that draws people in. And what can we do to bring people into that conversation that aren't already recognized stakeholders? Sometimes folks like parents don't realize that it's something that they can speak up about. So I would love for a meeting to be maybe a brainstorming session, or if we ask people ahead of time to be prepared for the conversation, but a conversation about how our community can be involved and what that could look like, that would be different from what we have in place already.
Any other comments? It looks like our next budget committee is Monday. And so I'm gonna, I think that's the date that the contract that EEA is scheduled to vote on ratifying the agreement. So we won't know if it's ratified or not. So it does make sense to see where we are, but I don't know if it makes sense timing wise to do that on Monday, and then have the so I'm just looking, Maya.
So I guess I'm going to take back the need to know where we are with our budget. It feels like we hear year in and year out about how folks can come and speak up. So maybe Monday would actually be a really good idea before we even move further, to think about how our community could be involved in our budget conversation. So I would suggest that we include that as an agenda item for as soon as possible, so that we start. It's not going to just materialize in one conversation, I'm sure, but we could at least begin dreaming about how to incorporate the community into our conversation in a more accessible way. Because regardless of what our budget ends up looking like, the conversations should be inclusive and accessible anyhow.
Yeah. So I think that would be one of the things that we might suggest being on the agenda for sure. I don't know if it's even appropriate. Andrea, I know you've done so much work on the budget. You probably know every scenario. Is it worthwhile to say, if the contract gets ratified, which we would not know until that day, I don't know what time the vote is, to share an update, or is that not enough time? I really want to be realistic and not get ahead of ourselves. So I'm asking really an innocent question to the superintendent and Andrea Bell. So what do you think? Would it not make sense? Or would it make most sense to wait and see?
So Andrea, I don't know your timeline. I don't know what you know or what you don't know. So
I think it would be good to wait until this is settled and we've had a chance to discuss, impacts that might go beyond the EEA contract negotiation. I also don't want to do anything before we present the proposed budget that might be indicative of making budget decisions. I don't want to influence those decisions until we are statutorily presenting the proposed budget.
Right. Okay, thank you. That's important to know for sure. Appreciate that.
But yes, we can share the impacts, of course, of the EEA agreement once it is ratified, so that we can see how that rolls through our 5-year forecast. So we will update that for everyone.
So our next budget committee meeting after the 28th of February is March 14th. So hopefully, yeah, by then. Laurel.
Click it and it doesn't work. Okay, yeah, I don't think presenting what could be happening, it's all forecast anyway. The same things you were telling us is, it's not gospel truth, it's the truth according to all the numbers you have so far and what you think is going to happen. So that's already been presented. I think we added more meetings because there were only like 3 on there, and I think I remember you have to have some kind of decision by the end of April or close to that, or you present it then. So I know your timeline is, we added the ones in between because your timeline was by the time we get to April, things are going to be moving quickly, right?
Correct. We present the proposed budget at the end of April, and then we have currently planned 2 meetings in May with sufficient time after the budget committee approves the proposed budget and moves it forward to the board for consideration to meet all of our statutory reporting requirements, so that the first board meeting in June can be the public hearing for the proposed budget.
Alicia.
So,
Laura, were you, sorry, you took your hand down. Were you have
I
a
took my
follow-up?
hand down when I started my question. So my intent was saying, I think it'd be great to present something if that's possible at this meeting. It would be the same numbers you've already been working with, as far as I understand, and for understanding. I like the pots of money idea as well, because that's one of the major things people to understand about government and how we have to do our money. Things live in certain pots, and you can't just pull them out and take them over to the other pot, which drives people crazy. So I like that as well. And I do want there to be room, like what Maya said, to have voice for what people are concerned about. So I like the idea of where we're going, adding more meetings and talking about really making it a budget committee that is looking at exactly what's done with the budget and why it's going that way, and people can ask questions, and I appreciate that. The transparency, I think, is important. It may not change a whole lot this year, but I think definitely starting the questions, we can start questions this year that can go into the next few years to be like, if it can't happen this year, then maybe something we can plan for. Thanks.
Oh, and Laurel, at our regular March 28th meeting, we will go through all of those other non-general fund activities, just so that when you see the proposed budget, you understand the different parts and pieces. Because so far we've only talked about the general fund and the forecast, but as you know, there's many other parts to what we do.
Yeah. Right. Thank you, Andrea. And also, just, the board has seen some of those numbers, but the rest of the budget committee hasn't, or the public yet, after we figure out how the new negotiations have happened. So that would be helpful to see. And I know I'd love to see them again too. Alicia.
Thanks, Judy. That's just what I was checking in on, because that was my point, which is we've shifted money, we've used money, our reserves are down. Those are all things that I think the budget committee should know. I mean, that's a big part of our budget. So the numbers aren't just the numbers that were presented before. They've been, if you will, spent. I appreciate and like the idea of Sabrina coming in and talking about those areas. So maybe that's what we do on Monday. And if we want to have a conversation about community involvement, you know, I need it framed as to how. You know, Gordon used the term bait and switch. I don't agree with what he said, but he did use that. And when we ask for public input, we have to know, and they have to know, how it will actually be used. And I'm kind of unclear with our budget. We ask a question in the budget committee interviews if you understood what the job of a budget committee member was, and everybody that applied said yes, and it's not to build the budget. So I need an in-depth conversation about what we would be inviting the community in to do, because there's nothing worse than taking an evening away, come in and think you're going to have some input and insight, you know, and you aren't. So let's talk about transparency, and not what we hope, but what is reality. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Alicia. So I think where we are is that on the meeting on the 28th, we will outline some of these ideas. We'll certainly check with the chair and the vice chair of the budget committee, make sure that, and then we'll be able to outline, talk about if we're going to have community input, how to make it transparent, how to get when to get updated budget information, which I hope will be on the sooner rather than later end, and the buckets of money, and outline our next meeting so we know how to prepare and sort of have a plan going forward. Sound like a plan? Okay. Thank you. And so we're going to move on to, thank you, Andrea, for being here for that. And we're going to receive an update on the district's response to COVID-19.
Okay, I don't know if the students are still here. I don't have a lot to tell them about what will happen in the future. We thought there would be a meeting yesterday that would give us an update from OHA, ODE, and OHSU. Sometimes will throw some comments in there as well, but that meeting didn't happen yesterday, and they have not rescheduled it. So I think that superintendents across the state are hoping that it'll be the end of this week, but it could be the beginning of next. And there are many questions. We don't know if they'll change Ready School Safe Learners, are what we call RSSL, that has all the rules in it. Like you need to stay 3 feet apart, you need to wear your mask anytime that you're inside unless you're eating, all of those rules. We don't know if they're going to be changed or if they're going to be different. What we do know is that they're watching case counts, and case counts have been dramatically dropping both county, state, and nationwide. And what I've heard is that they're looking at hospital rates, and the hospital rates will be the driving factor. So to answer the question about if we're taking our masks off or not, I don't know, because we haven't been given any kind of definitive steps forward. What we've been told is that we need to keep following the rules until we've been told something different. So what I'd like to do in the next few minutes, though, is have Karen come on and talk about absentee, what she's seeing in the classroom. And then Dawn is gone this week, but this meeting was supposed to be last week, so Dawn isn't here today. So Karen, if you'd like to share, and I think Brooke had a couple of things that she wanted to share as well, but it won't be we'll be wearing masks tomorrow. So how about that? And I think going forward, that is a question to be answered. So Karen.
Thank you. Just wanted to share that the numbers are dropping, which is good. I'm always just hesitant to be happy about anything related to the pandemic, because the minute you are, something happens and it turns itself around. But staff numbers are down tremendously. And I know people have been aware of the fact that it's been difficult to find licensed guest teachers for staff absences, that we seem to be ahead of the curveball on that too. We've been able to fill all positions that have required a substitute of late. And if you look at the dashboard, currently we only have the dashboard, which is very current, by the way. It is auto-populated from spreadsheets that the contact tracing team works in all the time. Staff count currently is 3 and the student count currently is 26, which is vastly different than it was just a couple of weeks ago. So good news on the guest teacher front, good news on the staff impact front. Student counts are going down, and it is my understanding that Lane County Public Health believes that, well, and maybe they've even changed their timeline. So I don't want to speak to when they thought we'd see like the low back to more reasonable counts after Omicron. So anyway, that's where we are with staff counts. And Sid, I don't know if you wanted, Sydney, if you wanted me to speak to anything else, or if you wanted Brooke to chime in with what we're doing to get feedback from, I think we were going to talk about feedback from our bargaining units on the concept of masking or unmasking.
So I was ready. Nice lead in, Karen.
Thank you.
And I'll reiterate what Karen said. It's always hesitant to talk about the pandemic because sometimes when we feel we might be on a road where things could change in a positive way, sometimes things sneak up on us. But I think it's really critical, and I know the students aren't on anymore, but I wanted to share that our employee groups, EEA, MAPS, and OSEA, I know MAPS and EEA have already sent their survey to their stakeholders. OSEA, if they haven't yet, are planning on it. We are currently working on a parent survey to get feedback from our parents in English and Spanish, and we'll be using text and email to make sure people see that. We are also working on a student survey that we can share with our students. So I wanted to have our students hear that piece too, so their voice could be heard, will be included in the stakeholder feedback. We are all doing this parallel to what Superintendent Vanderkar was speaking about, in the sense of if OHA or ODE make some changes, we feel like we've been given the March 31st date, and it's important for us to solicit feedback from our stakeholder groups. So we are in the process of doing that, and our goal would be to share that data with the board for conversation. And again, if ODE and OHA come out with something different between now and then, we can shift and maybe make a new plan. So we will see. But I wanted to share with you the solicitation of stakeholder feedback happening with our employee groups, and we will soon be doing that with our staff, our parent and community, and our students.
So Brooke, can I ask you, how long will it take to get that feedback? What's sort of the timeline with the solicitations?
Well, as we know, sometimes people think short and sweet is good, and sometimes people like it having it be open a little longer. So we're looking for the first part of March, and most likely it's always ideal to have it over a couple of weekends, and send reminders to families and to students. So I don't have those exact dates, Judy, but our goal was our stakeholder feedback from our employee groups is happening now, and then we'll shift into our external, the students we serve and the families.
Thank you. Any other questions? Comments? Okay, we're ready to move on. Thank you for bringing us up to date. That might have been our shortest COVID update we've had. Maybe it's previews of the future. Okay, we're moving into items for action. And the first item is approving revisions to policies related to the bias incidents and non-discrimination, and consider the adoption of the policy or regulation addressing racial harassment. So let's start with the first two. And Martina.
Yeah, so because based on the work session, it seems like there's going to be more discussion about the new policy, ACC addressing racial harassment. In the interest of efficiency, I'm going to propose that we break up those two chunks. So I move approval of revisions to policies ACB, bias incidents, and AC, non-discrimination.
Do we have can we do those in one motion?
Oh, good question.
Okay, great. Do we have a second? Okay, Martina has moved and Laurel has seconded. Is there any discussion about those two policies? Mary.
Well, I apologize for not being able to be at the work session, but I see there's an email memo from our legal counsel, and I'm wondering if she could take a few minutes to talk about that if appropriate, because it seems like if we're making these types of major revisions at this point, I'm not sure that I'm ready to vote on it. Thank you.
The revision, the amendments don't amend this policy. So the amendments would be to help promote the discussion that the board is going to have on policy ACC.
Okay.
So there are three policies that there are two revisions to policy, and then there's policy ACC, which is a brand new adoption. It's ACC that there's going to be more discussion about.
Okay, yeah, I just, like I
That's
said,
what my memo related to.
I just saw it at about 8:20 or so, and I haven't had a chance to read it yet. So I'll listen to the conversation. Thank you.
So Mary, we're going to vote on the other two. And then when we go to the third policy that those relate to, we'll ask her to walk us through them. How's that?
That's fine.
Okay, so any other discussion on the two policies in the motion? Okay, then I'm going to call for the vote. All in favor, please raise your hand. Leave it up so I can see everyone. So we have Mary, yes, Judy, yes, Martina, yes, Maya, yes, Alicia, yes, Laurel, yes. So the motion carries unanimously on a six yes vote. So it's passed. Great. Okay, now we are going to talk about, maybe we could start, Christine, by going through the amendments and then do a motion, or should we do a motion first?
I would, you can put the motion on the table. I can also share, I don't know, these amendments were drafted for individual board members to propose. And I'm happy to screen share them if that helps to facilitate the discussion. Whatever you want. And I don't know that the board members, Rabasa and O'Rourke, have had the opportunity to review them, but
I think it would be helpful to screen share them because I know I wasn't aware they were there either yet. So that would be great.
let's see. Hang on a second here. So the First Amendment was prepared at the request of board member Rabasa, and it would be to address the concern raised about giving people notice of resources and support systems. And so looking at the policy, staff believe that the appropriate place for that to be included would be it's on page 2, under the section called reporting and administrative action. And that would be in paragraph 2, and adding a sentence to that. So currently it reads, there's a list of things that the school administrator is supposed to do upon receipt of a report. So they're supposed to do these things, ... And that includes taking interim actions necessary to maintaining a safe learning environment and commit to preventing further harm against persons impacted. This will include, as circumstances warrant, the new language would be, this will include, as circumstances warrant, a description of resources and support structures. And I can blow that up a little bit so you can read that. And may I continue on through the others?
Yes, please.
Okay. All right. And then Board Member Rabasa, thank you for pointing out the awkwardness in that particular paragraph. So I've called this a technical correction to paragraph number 6 of the policy at page 3. And this is a list. This is to, we would be deleting sentence 1 of paragraph 6 and inserting the following sentence instead. So it would say, notify the impacted persons and perpetrators, comma, and their parents or guardians if they are students, comma, regarding the outcome of the investigation. So that would fix that awkwardness. And then Board Member O'Rourke asked for a paragraph relating that would maybe support a district texting program if that became available. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, Board Member O'Rourke, but in this one, there would be the paragraph that is underneath reporting and administrative action, which you'll see at page 2 of the policy. There's a paragraph immediately under that, and sentence 1 would be unchanged. Sentence 2 is currently rather long, and so it would be broken into, and it would be revised to say, students may also use an optional web-based or paper student safety reporting form available from the school and on the district website. And then we would add a new third sentence that would say, reports may also be made by text, comma, call, comma, email, comma, mobile app, or web app through Safe Oregon at, and it gives the telephone number or text number and the web address, or district dedicated text line if available. And then the last sentence of that paragraph would be unchanged. So to see it in context, there you go. You can look at the write-up.
So when are we talking about these?
I would recommend that someone place a motion on the table, and then if you would like, you can, someone can move to for an amendment of that.
So Martina.
Okay, so for the purposes of Robert's rulesing, I'm going to make a main motion, and then we can have each of the amendments on their own, which we'll vote on their own. And then once those amendments have been voted on, we'll return to vote on the main motion as amended. So I move approval of policy ACC.
We have a second. So Martina has moved and Alicia seconded, and now it's time for discussion. Maya.
I would like to make an amendment to that motion to delay voting by 1 week. And I'll wait to discuss if that gets seconded.
Is there a second to that motion? Laurel. So Maya has moved and Laurel has seconded that we delay this. Martina, do you have a question?
I don't think that that's an amend the motion. I think that that's a different kind of an action. I 100% see what you're trying to do, Maya. You're trying to say like, let's not do this tonight. But I don't think that it actually amends the motion. Am I right on Robert's rules on this? I see some head nods. So is there another way other people who are good at Robert's rules to say that the board would like to table this until next, I think I'm remembering that correctly, table this until our next meeting, and then we just kind of hold it over and pick it up then. Is that right? I see Laurel's hand. I see maybe Mary knows.
Table to a date certain.
Table to a date certain.
Sorry, Mary, when you say table to a date certain, do I name the date or do I use that specific language?
Yeah, you table it to a date certain. So otherwise you just put it on the table. It can stay there in perpetuity. But if you say I table to March 2nd, 2022, then it goes to that date on the agenda. And I'm more than happy to have legal counsel weigh in on that. But we could defeat the main motion, and you can make a motion to table it to a date certain. There's a couple of different options.
So can I do it as an amendment to move to table?
No, I think you just have, I think it's got to be a different motion.
So I just have to, okay.
Has clarification there, and then Laurel has her hand up.
I think the appropriate motion would be, I move to postpone consideration of policy ACC until, and then the date.
And Christine, that's a separate motion. I can't do that following Martinez. I have to convince everyone to vote that prior motion down first.
No, I think you can interrupt and do that.
So Judy, I know Laurel wants to go ahead, but because I did this incorrectly, can I just have that chance to say it correctly?
Yes.
Oh, Christine, say it one more time, please.
I move to postpone consideration of policy ACC until, and then whatever date.
I appreciate that. I move to postpone consideration of policy ACC until March 3rd, March 2nd. Yes.
And it's a majority vote, and a second is needed for that. So Laurel seconded. So Maya has moved and Laurel has seconded that we table the motion that's on the table to March 2nd. Laurel.
Is there space to talk about the amendments as written, or will that happen March 2nd? Because the amendments as written they're close, but they're not quite there. How does that work?
Well, we should probably take the vote, and then I think we could have some time for discussion.
Wouldn't this be the discussion time?
Well, I think I don't know that it's, we're discussing the amendments right now. We're just discussing the motion to table. So I think it would just be an agreement to talk about afterwards. Alicia.
Did Laurel get her question answered?
Well, I think I'm bumbling through it, but it seems that we need to respond to the postponement amendment, which doesn't relate to the amendments, the content amendments. So.
Okay, so I have a question on the postponement amendment. If Laurel's finished, are you good?
Well, I guess I'll just call the vote so I can have my other question.
Can I just ask some questions before we call the vote? Are you good? Are you good? Okay, so my question is, what's going to be different in a week? I'm anxious to get this moving because, we've been promising it and it's part of our plan. And I'm not sure why we would wait a week. So I don't know if Maya could speak to that. I'd appreciate it.
Laurel,
Oh,
great. Okay, good. I didn't know if Laurel raised her hand first to answer that.
I would say for me, I would like time. I think we're close, as I said. I also don't think pushing this, making it go faster is helpful per se. It needs to really be done correctly. I think there's some things that we want and that are there in the amendment, but there for myself, as far as just writing the word text, but then having a whole sentence to talk about Safe Oregon is problematic. So I would like to see more weight given to the forms of communication because they're so important. I think it's easy to just, if we just put a word in, it doesn't say exactly what I was trying to say in regards to the policy. That's me. And I feel like that back and forth could happen within that time period.
So Maya, do you have anything to add? Thank you, Laurel. That was helpful.
yeah, I think this is a really big deal. And I know that legally we can vote without everyone here, but I would like to make this vote be something that we all vote in favor of together. I also would love for, as Mary indicated, she missed that entire conversation, which was a really robust discussion. And I think that this type of policy deserves the attention that we all were able to give it. So I feel I would feel more confident giving this policy the attention it deserves, and I don't feel like 1 week of delaying the vote to be able to get everybody on board fully supporting it, as well informed as possible, is a detriment to our cycle. The policy was suggested and sat untouched for a long time until there was a moment of crisis, and I don't want us to be driven by crisis when we want something to have longevity and sustainability. So I want to give an answer to the community, but I want to give the community, and as Superintendent Vanderkar mentioned, this is something that other districts across the state want to see. And until we are all on the same page, I think that it deserves to wait just 7 days. We'll be back together in a week.
And 2 times in between. Alicia.
So I am prepared and came prepared to vote on this policy. And so I'm going to say this, and I'm not saying it to slap anybody upside the head. It's truly from my gut. We rushed a equity tool through. We pushed it through and we left people out. And I don't think we have a strong equity tool, as strong as if we'd had a 7-0 vote, if we had just waited a week. And I truly believe in that saying, experience is what you get when you don't get what you want. And I got a lot of experience. So to that end, listening to Maya and listening to Laurel, I am going to vote to wait a week so that all voices that may have been left out and amendments will have time to be written in the way that the people amending feel most supportive about it. And I'm hoping that we come back at some point and capture that equity tool and do it in a way that does it justice. And I know we have a work session, and I'm hoping that we get that. I will vote for 1 week, and then we're going to have a because I don't think we all agree on what should be in this policy. And so I think we're going to have to make sure we have plenty of time for a very spirited conversation to get the best policy possible. Thanks.
Maya, and then Superintendent.
Alicia, I really appreciate what you just said, and those are very humbling words, and I feel very similarly. if we don't learn from our past mistakes, then we'll just be running forward without knowing where we're stepping. So I also, with regrets on how that previous decision was handled, appreciate that commitment to giving this the time that it needs, and that other decision should have had as well.
Superintendent?
I want to ask Christine a question. Are we leaving it just like it is, or does it need further work? Because I know that you're tied up and it won't be in the packet on Friday. So is it just stay how it is right now? Because I know your time is completely full the next 2 days.
Yeah, and keep going. I think we could what I would do is I would put in the board packet exactly what we have right now. And then if there was more work on a proposed amendment, that we could put that in the board packet. I won't be able to do any more work on proposed amendments this week, but I could do that on perhaps Monday and for sure on Tuesday.
Okay, so I guess what I wanted to be very clear about is what you'll see in the board packet that comes out on Friday is what you see right now. And I just didn't want anyone to be surprised that we didn't work it in or all of those pieces, because one, we didn't vote on it, and two, we could get, if people want to email us or something, maybe we could work on that on Monday or Tuesday.
Would we also include your proposed amendment language that what you emailed, or would that just come up in the conversation?
Well, I guess, to not confuse things, I think it would make the most sense to talk with board members Rabasa and O'Rourke about that, and to try to, my role here is to help them express in a motion what they want to propose. Staff's proposed policy and recommendation is what it is, and you have it. So beyond that, I'm available to help any board member with a proposed amendment if they want my drafting assistance with that, and it's often can be helpful. So I put that out there, and we can publish those in the board packet as long as they're done by the end of the day, Tuesday. I would not be able to do that by Friday.
Thank you, Christine, and thank you for asking the question. That's really good to be realistic about expectations. I appreciate that. Mary?
Well, I just hope that when it does go in the packet, that it's put in as it is now and not with the proposed amendments, because those are simply proposed amendments by individual board members that haven't been discussed or fully vetted or voted on by the rest of the board. And I know this has been my concern about some of the working agreements, in that the language got put in as if it had been approved. So I just want to be really clear that in what we'll see in the packet is what the staff has presented now, and then on a separate page or an addendum list the proposed amendments, and so we can discuss each one individually, the merits. Thank you.
Thank you. Laurel?
I'm just clarifying, that means both things will be in the packet. They just won't be in the policy as if it was already done, correct?
Yeah, we can upload any proposed amendments to the board packet on Tuesday. So I think that would be preferable to uploading a set now that doesn't really reflect your intention. It's just going to be confusing. So the best thing would be upload the proposed policy as it is. And then if you would like more assistance, we can connect on Monday or Tuesday, or if you want to just do it yourself, and we can publish those things.
Okay, and we have that, because mostly what you wrote was, like I said, I felt like we're almost there. I would like to see something a little bit different. So but we have that by email, you said.
Yes.
Correct? Okay. Thank
So,
you.
so Laurel, so you take a look at that, and if you want to have a conversation with Christine or email, and she would help draft, so what your intention is, okay? And Maya the same.
I'll send something, and I understand you're busy till Tuesday. Got it. And I'll be on a plane on Tuesday, so I'll try to get it before then.
Thank you. Okay, Mary.
Well, I just wanted to thank Alicia for her comments because this isn't meant to be snippy either, but the equity tool is still hanging out there, and I think we rushed to judgment on that. And since then, we've had multiple times to go back and fix that, and I don't think we've done that yet. So I'm fine waiting a week to get this right, and really approaching this next week with a good discussion around what the amendments might be, and doing that with fidelity and integrity. Thank you.
Thank you. So are we ready to vote on tabling? It's just a majority vote. I did look it up. So do you want to remind us, Martina, what's on the table? Or Maya, I'm sorry, it was yours.
I moved to postpone consideration of policy ACC until March 2nd. And it was seconded, I believe, by Laurel.
Yeah, that's okay. So I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor of the motion, raise your hand. Mary's yes, Judy's yes, Maya's yes, Martina's yes, Alicia's yes, and Laurel's yes. So the motion passes 6-0 unanimously. Okay. Thank you. Then we have Lane ESD's local service plan. I see Superintendent Skirdo's name on it. Do you think he waited all this time? Is he here or?
He is not here. He said that if you guys had any questions, you were to email me and I would forward them to him and he would come back, but I didn't receive any from you. So I made the assumption that you all understood what you were voting on.
Do we have a motion? Martina.
I move approval of the Lane Education Service District Local Service Plan.
Do we have a second? Okay, Maya. So Martina's moved and Maya has seconded. Is there any discussion on the service area plan? Seeing no hands, I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor of the motion to pass the service area plan, raise your hand. We have a Mary, yes, Judy, yes, Maya, yes, Martina, yes, Alicia, yes. All those opposed, raise your hand. Laurel is voting no, so the motion oh, I'm sorry. Are you voting yes, Laurel? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, then the motion carries with a vote of 6-0, carries unanimously, and it passes. Okay, then now we have our working agreements on the agenda, and Martina has a motion.
All right, so I move approval of the board working agreements.
Do we have a second? Martina moved approval of the working agreements as they appear in the packets, and Alicia seconded. Do we have any discussion? Laurel's hand is up and then Mary. Laurel.
Well, I mean, we have working agreements, but I see everyone, I hope everybody tries to follow them, but then in the last motion, it was disturbing to me, 2 board members were bringing up the equity lens that they didn't vote for, they voted against, to again bring it up as something that shouldn't have happened. And I just don't want to do that kind of petty stuff, and that's part of our working agreements, not to be that way. So I just wanted to hold a light to that and say I would really like it if we weren't doing things like that, because that's disingenuous to say, yeah, I vote for working agreements, but also do things like that.
Thank you. Alicia, or Mary, your hand was up next, but you did you want to go next and then Alicia? Okay, Alicia.
Thanks. I just really want to be clear. My intent was not to be petty at all. In fact, I tried to start with that. My intent was that I would have voted to move the policy forward, but that I learned something from that. It wasn't being petty. And I'm kind of, it's one of those things about, you know, how we all get along. We do learn things, and I might have voted no at the time, but it was the learning of rushing that I was taking away from. I wasn't bringing it up to be petty at all. So I just really want to be clear on that. Thanks.
Mary?
Thank you. I was looking because I wanted to make sure I had the right reference. This sort of speaks to my concern that I mentioned before, because I don't ever remember having the discussion on this one particular sentence or section, because I would have said something. I think it got included in one of the drafts and now it's there as if the board had discussed it. It's under, sections aren't numbered, but it's under duties, responsibilities, and role of board leadership, and it's sub-paragraph number 1 or number 1. It says board leadership is the annually elected chair and vice chair of the board. Terms for these roles begin on July 1 and end on June 30th. And here's the problem. Here's the sentence I have the problem with. A confirmation vote will take place at the first board meeting on or after July 1st in those years when incoming new board members are unable to vote for leadership. I think that's a fundamental swipe at democracy. Unlike President Trump, who is trying to undo the 2020 election, I don't think that any elected body should be able to undo the actions of a previous elected body, especially when it's an election. So I am in opposition to that notion and that idea. We vote for board leadership based on what we think is right at the time. And I don't think you should go back and retroactively change things. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. It's undemocratic, and I can't support that one sentence. Thank you.
So Mary, do you want to make a motion to amend by omitting that? Is that?
Yeah, I guess I can do that. That would be cleaner. I don't know if there were other, I don't know if you want to have other conversations, if there are other pieces of the body or the document that people wanted to talk about, or if you want to go through one by one.
I think we should take them one by one for
Okay,
sure.
well, I have a good idea how the outcome is going to come, but how the outcome will be, but I'm still going to make the motion. I move to amend the vice chair's motion to approve the working agreements by deleting the second sentence under duties, responsibilities, and role of board leadership, which reads, a confirmation vote will take place at the first board meeting on or after July 1 in those years when the incoming new board members are unable to vote for leadership. So what I'm proposing in short is to delete that sentence entirely.
Do I have a second for Mary's amendment? Alicia. So Mary's moved and Alicia seconded. So now we'll have a discussion on that amendment. And Laurel, is that your hand up for the discussion?
Yeah, so all these discussions already happened. This all happened over, I'm gonna say forever, last 5 months. Why wasn't this brought up when we were talking about it? So, and the reality is what will happen if this motion passes is I will not vote to agree to the working agreements. I will find it also undemocratic. So if that's that important to not let new board members be part of choosing who their leadership is, then I have a fundamental ethical problem with that.
Martina.
With respect to everyone, I'd like to call the question on this.
On the amendment? I mean, on the, yeah, okay. So the question's been called and do we want it? I think we need a majority vote to then call it. 2/3 majority. Okay. All those that are in favor of voting on the amendment now, raise your hand. We have Martina. Okay, all those opposed?
What? I don't understand the question.
So we're voting to call the question. So I called the question, which means I'm asking for us to end discussion on the amendment and go to voting on the amendment. So what we're voting on in this moment is whether or not we're ending discussion, not the merits of the amendment itself. So I am calling the question, which means the vote that you take right now is, do you want to also have the question be called? It's confusing, I know.
I am going to go with Martina.
So maybe we can just rerun that real quick just to make sure that everyone voted in the way that they understood. Is that okay, Judy?
Yeah, I'm just checking if we need a majority or a 2/3 majority for that.
Totally fair.
If you're voting to restrict voice, which would mean calling the question, I think you need less. I don't think you need a full majority.
It requires 2/3 vote, I believe.
Yeah, it does on my rules, I guess. So, okay. So we have the motion to call the question. And so all those in favor of calling the question right now and voting on the amendment, raise your hand. And I think we have 2 votes for yes, Martina and Laurel. So the motion goes down. So we have 2 people in line in the queue to speak. We have Alicia and then Maya.
So Mary, I appreciate you bringing it forward, but in reality, it does not matter for this board because we are not going to face that situation. And the new board will come in with their own working agreement. So while I don't like it and I would vote when it gets called, I'd vote against it. It's kind of, it's not moot, but it's not going to affect this board, and we'll create new working agreements next year. And we'll spend another 8 months on hopefully not 8 months. So if we can do this vote quickly, I'd appreciate it.
Right, thank you. Maya.
I just have a question. I guess it's a 2-part question. Didn't we do this year? I feel like I recall having, I think it was called a ratification, not a confirmation. And if so, why did the prior board make the decision to do so? And why would we not continue that practice?
We did do it. And it was in a transition period when, I don't know if you remember, I stepped in as vice chair and there was a whole lot of conversation. So we never really had a conversation about it or made a decision in our working agreement. So you're right, Maya, it did happen, but it wasn't ever really put in working agreements or not at that point.
I understand that wasn't in the working agreements prior to this. I'm just wondering why you all made the decision to offer the newly formed board the opportunity to ratify the decision. That's just my question. I'm wondering what the prior experience and insight led folks to make that decision in the past, so I can help myself make it now.
And I don't recall the conversation. I just know there was there were big feelings to do it at the time. Mary has her hand up, and then Martina.
I was just going to offer a little bit of history. Yeah, I was unable to attend the meetings late June, early July. And this, I believe, was a compromise that was made, and I don't know who suggested it. So it has never been done before, to my knowledge, in the time I've been on the board. Alicia, you can tell me if I'm wrong. So that happened and then became habit, I believe, or at least as an assumed habit. And I think that's how it ended up in the draft of the working agreements. And my point is that one sentence, to my recollection, and I've been through every other discussion that we've talked about this, that sentence was never discussed, and it's like I said earlier, I'm pretty sure I can figure out how the vote's going to come out, but I felt like I needed to bring that up because I truly believe it's undemocratic.
Thank you, Mary. Martina.
So I guess to answer Maya's question about the context, I was one of the folks who thought that it would be nice to have new board members make some kind of ratification or confirmation, in part because at any point the full board could vote to change the leadership structure, right? Like that is a thing that could happen. And so it doesn't feel to me to be like entirely outside of the norms of behavior. And I think it is nice. And honestly, the way that it felt to me was a vote of confidence, right? Which felt like really affirming as the vice chair, and really hearing that all members of this new board are in agreement with that. So obviously all members of the board could at some point decide to vote chair and vice chair out. That is possible too. So it doesn't seem to me to be necessarily undemocratic, because those two positions are not, they're not unimpeachable, if you will.
Any other discussion? Then I will call the vote on the amendment. So all those in favor of removing that sentence of ratifying the leadership on years when there's a new board, raise your hand and say aye. We have one aye vote. All those opposed, raise your hand and say aye. Or no, nay. So Martina, Judy, Maya, Alicia, and Laurel vote to, the motion is defeated with 1 yes vote and 5 no votes. Okay. Now let's vote on the working agreements, the original amendment. Any more discussion or amendments on that? No more discussion on that. I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor of passing the working agreements as they appear in the packet, raise your hand and say aye. So we have Martina, yes, Judy, yes, Maya, yes, Alicia, yes, Laurel, yes. All those saying no, same sign. Mary's no. So the working agreements pass, 5 yeses and 1 no vote. Okay, thank you. Laurel.
I think it should be said that I see and recognize the amount of work that you and Martina did for this, because it was, I'm not sure how many months. I don't think I realized at first how much work it was, but changing and bringing all those packets and putting it together and taking all this hive mind and putting it into a way that I think you made, I think there were 4 different versions. So I just want to say thank you for that hard, free work, because I think we should always notice that that was a lot of volunteer hours. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm just glad we got them passed. Okay, so looking at your agenda for tonight, there's some meetings coming up. We have our training retreat this weekend. We have a budget committee meeting Monday, the 28th. We have a board meeting on Wednesday, the 2nd. And then we have a training on Monday, the 7th from OSBA. So get lots of rest. And I have 2 hands up for future agenda items. Laurel, no. Mary, no, Mary.
My question is about leadership. It's also on the 7th at 5:15. So how are we going to have that in 15 minutes or what?
Good.
March 7th. March 7th.
Yes, thank you. Can we talk about that and get back to you? Thank you for bringing that.
Sure, I just wanted to flag it.
No, right, and I'll have to see who's on deck for attending that meeting. You are, Mary? Okay. We could reschedule with the superintendent and leadership and you and make something work. Thank you. Maya.
I would like us to consider whether it's in a board meeting or otherwise, finding time and space to listen to the folks that are impacted in the North region with their very immediate situation. So specifically are they the 480 or 430 Howard Avenue? I don't know what they're calling themselves, but the folks at the Kelly building that are sharing that space.
8:50.
Say that again, Mary?
8:50.
8:50. Totally off.
Thank you for bringing that up, and I'm glad, Mary, you'll be in leadership because you're on that committee, and we'll talk about when and how to do that. Alicia, Mary, and then Laurel.
I just want to be one of the votes that moves that forward. I'm curious to do, and maybe leadership can look at this. I want to obviously listen to people, but I really want to start figuring out what the plan is. And I also just really want to say, I know one of the board members blamed communication and questioned the ethics of communication. And as I vote for this, I don't believe that. I think that's actually very wrong to do. I just want to say I think these things happen because funding, we have less money. When we started, we weren't sure we were going to be able to keep that old section of North. And when we get in there, we find out we can't. Those were things that were questionable when we started this process. And it wasn't bait and switch. It was reality hit us. And now we've got to reconvene and provide adequate and excellent space for these programs. But to blame it on communication, I believe is wrong, just wrong.
Mary, thank you.
Well, I would just comment on that too, that actually there's a meeting this Friday, and I know we're going to talk about the next steps. We also COVID intervened and changed things radically about the space in the building and staffs being there. And I think it's really premature to bring in the community because the staff had specifically asked that they be allowed to speak among themselves first. And to blame this on communication is really, I believe, disingenuous. And I think if any group has to blame, it's us as board members, because back as early in September, I had asked if we could have a work session to talk about what the board goals were and what those all entailed. And to date, that hasn't happened. We haven't talked about climate change. We haven't talked about the transparency and communication, nor the North, and those were 3 of our board goals. So I don't think pointing the fingers at staff is particularly helpful. And with regard to the North region, I do want to give the staff, which they requested, the chance to talk amongst themselves before we open it to the general community. And we've made no firm promises to anybody in the North region, lest Kelly and YG. But as I said many times when I was hoping we would make this a board goals, we need to make a decision and let the parents and the community know what's going to happen. And to date, we haven't done that. So the finger should be pointing at us as board members for our lack of detail or lack of attention to that goal. Thank you.
Thank you. I do accept some responsibility there too. Laurel.
Yeah, I'd like to, we have on our goals for this year is a comprehensive communication plan. The reason we're asking for that is precisely these things that happen, that our communication is opaque. It's done in very certain ways, but it's not done in a way that really informs the public. I think public should actually, students and parents and anybody connected to school should be involved because they are obviously already involved. So our communication is not done well. And I would love for it to be a lot better. And so what I'm learning being on the board is that if it's an interest to staff that a committee is made and people talk about it and a policy is put forward, but I want a communication policy. I want it to be robust. I want it to be very much transparent and to say we are part of this community. We're not just telling this community what's going to happen next. And so I would love for there to be a committee of some sort to talk about communication where it's not just left on the board to have this discussion, but that it happens at the district level, because our communication affects the whole of 4J. This is just one example of it, and it's real. There's proof of it. So saying, I don't think that's right, it shouldn't be said, is just performative. What we really need to do, which is none of that really matters. It's like the pointing fingers never helps anything, right? We need to acknowledge it and work on it and do something better. So working on our communication policy and what we want from it is how that change will happen. Ignoring it and pretending it's fine and there's just a few things going on is not working, obviously. And I don't think we particularly dropped the ball, because I feel like we've been working our hind knees off. Everybody, staff, us, everybody. So I think we just have a lot on our plate, and we're playing, I hate to say catch up, so I don't mean it in regards to students, but for us, it is a little bit of catch up work. And for us and staff, we have to kind of catch up for things that couldn't happen, I guess, last year. Thanks.
Maya.
Yeah, I don't know, Mary, if you were able to be listening into our comments when we made them earlier, but it might be worthwhile noting that I think Alicia was referring to Gordon's statement, because I didn't refer to communications myself, but Gordon did very much call the board to task. It wasn't exclusively a question of communications. So I think that's really worth noting that what you are saying is in alignment with what Gordon was saying earlier. Also, in terms of the giving staff time to meet, they've been taking care of that. I had the privilege of being invited to a meeting where this was communicated to me by, if I'm not mistaken, all but 3 of the YG teachers, and I had a similar conversation with Kelly teachers. So this isn't rushing ahead of them. This is in response to what they are asking for. They're asking for, how do we get our students heard? How do we get our families heard? How do we get our teachers heard? Because they're feeling like this is moving away from them quickly. I'm hearing that the North Visioning team isn't including teachers, for example. And it's something that we as a board deserve to lend our ear to, and also deserve to be as well informed as possible, so that in the course of decision making, we aren't finding ourselves with holes that we regret later and having to call ourselves to task again a year from now.
Well, I think giving these comments, we have more than 3 people, and it is a board goal. So we will discuss a good process at leadership. So with that being said, I am going to close the meeting tonight, and we're adjourned, and thank everyone for being present the whole time and your participation. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.